Yeah, maybe we can do that.
Good evening. Today is Tuesday, March 1st, 2022, and this is a special meeting and study session of the Governing Board of the Litchfield Elementary School District. I hereby call this special meeting to order. First up on our agenda this evening is item 1B, which is the Community Education Department Tuition Amendment Proposal presented by Dr. Stair. Dr. Stair, you have the floor.
Madam President, I got
Yes.
one question here.
Yes.
Point of order. Since we moved some discussion and possible approval items to this agenda, are we required to have a call to the public so they can discuss? Can someone explain that to me when we have action items that somebody may want to talk about? Public? So they aren't given the opportunity to discuss these action items. Is that in violation of open meeting law? You're
No,
shaking your head, but I'm not understanding. Is it or isn't it?
So this is considered a special meeting,
I
and during
understand that.
special meetings, we do not have to have call to the public. You actually, in no meeting do you have to have call to a public, but we do have that on our regular general agenda,
I understand
meeting
that.
agenda. Mhm.
My question is, this was a study session, a special meeting, but we added action items to the meeting.
So there's,
That, to me, makes it a regular meeting.
no, there's two separate meetings tonight. There's a special meeting and there is a study session,
I understand.
right? But we do not have,
Superintendent Gunning, I understand that.
right,
My
But we do
question
not have-
is,
right.
in the special meeting,
There is no
Or-
call to the public in our policy, in our agendas. And we've never done call to the public in a special meeting.
okay. My concern is if there's possible action items tonight, the public doesn't have the opportunity to speak to those items. Right?
that is correct. That is correct. How I will agree with Superintendent Gunning in that we have not historically had call to the public in our special meetings. However, we can certainly add that if that is a concern of yours, that we are not allowing the public the opportunity to comment on our actions.
My only concern is violation of open meeting law. It is not giving the public access, the ability to discuss items that are possible
Well,
action items.
what I will say to that is I have taken numerous classes
Right.
on open meeting law at this point in my board member career. And my understanding is the fact that this meeting is open to the public and available to the public means that we are in compliance with open meeting law. It is not required to allow a call to the public or public members being able to speak to us or address us at any board meeting. We allow them the privilege of that at our regular board meetings.
Yeah,
So we are in compliance with open meeting law. If you have a concern that we're not allowing that and you would like that to happen, we can certainly address that in future meetings going forward.
I understand the call of the public. They can speak about anything they want to speak about. Sometime, numerous times, they will speak about something that's on the agenda for possible action. That was my only concern. And I'm being told it's not the way you do business in the school district, correct?
Correct. And they have ample time. That's why you post the agenda in advance, so that they have ample time to email any board member, any feedback that they have regarding any agenda item.
I'd like to discuss this, not tonight, but I think that's a little bit of concern on my part. So,
No problem. Ms. Potapoff, could you ensure that that makes it onto our future agenda discussion items from Dr. Dowling? Thank you.
It's real low. It's coming through now.
Any further discussion on that? Excellent. Dr. Stair, the floor is yours to discuss the community ed amendment proposal.
There's a button you can push. All right. And in the interest of time, I know you've all had the PowerPoint sent to you ahead of time. I'll try to summarize, and then I can address any concerns that you like. Currently, every time someone makes an online transaction to pay for any of our programs, preschool or extended day, we charge them a $2 transaction fee. And that is to offset a portion of the transaction charge that we charge. If you look at this chart here, our least expensive program is our PM minimum use program, which is $110 a month. And every time someone pays, we pay $3.69 in transaction fees, but we charge them $2 for that transaction fee. Our most expensive program there would be full day preschool because it's 12 hours a day. And we pay almost $24 in transaction fees, but again, we charge them $2. What I'm proposing is that we just add the $2 into our rates. That works best with our account management software. Most families will not end up paying more than they're paying now. The only families that will pay more are those families with more than one child. That being said, with more than one child, because they'll be paying per program if we do this. And so if you have one child in extended day and a child in preschool, if both of their tuitions go up $2 a month, now they're paying $4 a month. However, when you have multiple kids in programs in our system, they do get a multiple child discount, which more than offsets this increase. And then any families that don't pay at all online, currently we have 6 families that haven't paid online all this year. It would affect them as well. Although I would point out that there's still a cost to managing their programs, because since the registration is online now, we pay a fee every month, a large fee every month to the software vendor. And so there's still a cost to managing their programs. And so again, I'm proposing that we just go ahead and add $2 to every rate program in order to offset this and to simplify the accounting procedure.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Stair?
I don't have any questions, just a statement that I was actually, we've talked about tuition rates many times, and we don't need to go into that. We're extremely sensitive and trying to do the best we can with keeping our tuition rates as low as possible. But I was actually really surprised. We've never sort of gone this deep into the transaction fees. And while I think the $2 rate is necessary, more than necessary, I think in the future, we should actually look at making it cover more of the actual fee. I think, sitting at maybe a 10 or 12% coverage is way below the standard. And I think our tuition rates need to be adjusted to make sure that we're actually covering the costs that are coming into us. So I'm more than happy to support the $2, but think in the future, we may need to adjust that accordingly.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you for this presentation, Dr. Stair. I did read it all ahead of time, as I hope the rest of the board members did as well. In the interest of time, if there's no further questions, then I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the Community Education Department tuition amendment proposal as presented.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stair. Next on our agenda is item 1C, discussion and approval of a new position and job description, Deputy Superintendent of Academic Success. And Superintendent Gunning, the floor is yours.
Madam President, members of the governing board, based upon the feedback from the last governing board meeting, I made some adjustments to the position. The new title is Deputy Superintendent of Academic Success. This position will help in supporting our over 11,000 students, 17 schools, supporting all of our principals, so that all principals would report directly to this, as well as 2 of our executive directors would report to the position. Some additional changes that were added to the job description is having a doctorate preferred, 5 or more years principal and district level experience, and the superintendent's certification is required. I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
I had a question, but I think that you just answered it. I wasn't sure. I saw that you'd added the doctorate in educational leadership. I was concerned about that being a requirement. I didn't think that that was appropriate, but you said preferred, and that was where I was going with it. So thank you.
Superintendent Gunning, can you tell us a little bit more about the salary expectation and maybe, I know we don't know who that candidate will be or how much experience they have, but can you tell us a little bit more about those ranges and where you might see that landing?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a lot of components that are made up into the component of salary. So when we look at that initial step, so somebody coming in with very basic experience would start at about $115,000 range. Now within that component of that package, they would also be eligible for performance pay. Now on their first year, they're only eligible for level 3. And then after their first year, they could be eligible for up to level 4. The district does pay monies towards their benefits package as well. So that would help with that component, and as well as a car allowance, since that person is out and about and traveling each and every day. We are in hopes that right now this position, the compensation falls in between the executive directors and myself. So the compensation falls within that piece. Of course, if there is anything that we needed to look at or look into based on somebody we were hiring that may have more than 6 years of experience, if that were the case, then I would definitely be coming back to you to inquire.
Once this position is approved, where will it be posted for folks to find out about it?
So we'll post it in many areas. We'll post it with, I call it our alphabet soup group. So ASBO, ASBA, ASA, ADE, our HR organization as well. And then we'll see which other national opportunities with those same groups that we could also post it. But we would like to post, if approved tonight, we would begin the posting process tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do any other board members have questions for Superintendent Gunning?
Yes, I have some questions. Under the essential functions, about halfway down, oversees recruitment, hiring, and management of staff. So as I look at the org chart, the new one, or revised one that would be based on the approval of this position, it sounds like HR should be under that person if they oversee recruitment, hiring, and management of staff.
It would be in their departments and their components that they oversee. So they would be the overseer of anything that would fall under Gina DeCoste's arena, which would be like curriculum and technology and those kind of components with Megan Duplain, anything under special ed. So they would be the overseer of that, possibly participate in the recruitment process, depending on the level of the position, but would definitely be the person that they would consult for those key level positions. Same thing for like principal. When their principals open, when there are principal openings currently, I oversee the principal, so I'm involved in that recruitment process. So this person would take that role over.
And also under essential functions, the second to the last bullet reviews federal and state legislation regulations related to curriculum, assessment, and accountability in ELL programs. Why wouldn't you have listed Title II in there?
The reason being for that component is because they are overseeing principals. So you're overseeing the management and operations of a school. So you have to have all of that knowledge and understanding to be able to coach and communicate and lead your principals, even though you may not be in the details of actually managing the grant. You need to understand it, what's being approved, what's in that process, and being able to see if the implementation and follow through is happening at the school level.
Okay, next question would be somewhere I saw on here, maybe someone can point it out to me. There was a possible need for administrative assistant. I I don't see a possible need. I see a definite need. I mean, you don't want to share administrative assistant with somebody you may be evaluating.
Yes, so that could be something that we bring back. I'd like to hire the person first because I'd want them to be involved in that process.
And I have another question. Why wouldn't this position, instead of having another salary schedule for this position for one person, why wouldn't you just make it an exempt position? This is one of the few times I've ever seen a deputy superintendent on a salary schedule. In fact, I can't recall ever seeing it, but I could be wrong.
Well, as historically within our district, there's even a salary schedule for my position. So we wouldn't want to make that change, but that could be something that we could look at as we're looking at the phases of implementation of that compensation study on some of the things that we found that are opportunities for us in our district. So that could be something that we could look at for those higher level positions of not having necessarily a salary schedule, but just making them exempt and bringing it back.
And
This
look-
also does help though a little bit for budgetary purposes. I know for Wendy for preparing or for, whoever is in that role for preparing so that they kind of have an estimation of a guideline of the scope in which we're working in.
So what I'm hearing is if we find a person, or if you find a person and they're brought forward and there could be an issue with the money, we can
I could
What?
come to ask for a salary exception.
okay.
From
Salary
you.
exception, I've seen that before.
You have seen that before.
And will there be an interview committee?
Yes, we will put forth a committee. What we'll do is actually design a process for this position. We want it to be a little more extensive than a typical administrative position. So working on right now, designing what does that look like of having components probably similar to my process of where there could be potential opportunities for staff to be involved, as well as maybe the community at whole, as well as a committee to narrow down the pool of candidates to where the final candidates would move forward with that additional process.
Can we move now to the job description instead of the justification part here?
Yes, feel free.
Okay. Just a minor detail. Under education requirement on the second page of the job description,
Mhm.
the doctorate in educational leadership, it should read, should be a comma there, and it should be E, capital E, small d, big D. So we're missing a big D on that.
Okay.
It's a minor deal, but I'm a little bit anal when I see things like that. Not a little bit, a lot. So.
Thank you for that.
And-
I am
And one more
as well.
thing was experience in, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
No, I just was thanking you for your attention to detail. So go ahead and give us more attention to detail.
Thank you. The experience in the next part under experience, why wouldn't you have experience in curriculum development leadership required?
It was preferred.
I know it's preferred. I
Right.
prefer required. I would think you'd want somebody with that kind of experience as a requirement for the job.
But they may not necessarily have been in a director of curriculum position to be in this role. So
It doesn't say that. It says experience in curriculum development leadership. It doesn't mean you have to be a director of curriculum. You could be somebody who leads, happens to be whatever, a veteran building principal who has extensive experience in curriculum and development and leads the summer development program, for example. I'm
Right.
not saying they have to be a
right, I
director.
see that as two different things. I see professional development and delivery of professional development as one thing, but curriculum development is very specialized. That's in developing the curriculum and being a part of like curriculum mapping, things that are very specific within our curriculum department. So it would be awesome if they have that background and that experience. But a principal or a leader might have gone from a principal position, which is not typically involved in curriculum development, and say move to director of Title I or something along those lines. Just different.
Can we move down to the next category, which is knowledge, the sixth bullet down? This is, this reflects back on my question. The reason I even brought up the previous question I had about the required versus preferred on the curriculum development leadership. The sixth bullet says demonstrated skill in curriculum and professional development. You're already asking for it. That's my point.
Well, I think having skill in curriculum and the understanding of curriculum and the implementation of curriculum on a campus is different than the actual development of a curriculum.
And on the under physical activities and visual define that next word for me.
Let's see, where are you at?
Visual acuity is the word.
Acuity. I haven't got my dictionary. What does that mean?
Huh. Let's see it on there.
Acuity is a sharpness, and visual or hearing, it's hearing acuity, visual acuity. So it's just like a sharpness, being able to do something well.
Okay,
Yeah. I don't think it's a special skill. It's just, you know,
okay. I just wondered how you demonstrate that, I guess, or show a lack of or a lack of. The under the usual customary methods of performing the job function, the second sentence, you've got a colon after requirements, then you have light work and another colon. I'm not sure that's proper grammar. A colon after another colon. The light work, I don't see. I think light work should be just taken out.
Yeah, I think that's a typo.
Just delete it. Would make a little bit more sense. Requirements exerting up to 20 pounds. So. And at this point, I will defer to anybody else that has any questions.
Do any other board members have questions or points of clarification for Superintendent Gunning regarding the job description?
My question is, if, we have a candidate and the question of the pay comes up, what is the procedure that's involved for determining that if we decided we want to make a variance? as you
Right. So
mentioned?
what I would do is bring back that candidate for recommendation and what the salary recommendation is. And if it's outside of the scope of this, I would be asking you for a salary exception for the board to approve.
And what if the recruitment process required increasing it or whatever,
Then I would definitely keep you posted. So if it does become or seems to be a hindrance in the recruitment process, then I would come back to you to ask for an adjustment to this.
But would you be able, until that time, would you be, if you saw that you needed to be looking, maybe in a higher bracket, would you have the authority to look for them?
Yes.
And then you'd come back and say, hey, I'm only, I got some good candidates that,
I have some good candidates that I would like to.
so you would be able to,
move
you
forward.
would have that freedom.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, that's a good question. To me, this is a position that we need, and we need to see it, if approved, post it fairly quickly. The salary issue, is that going to be, are we saying that the superintendent has the authority to negotiate the salary and then bring it back to us? Because I can see this as a possible delay in hiring the person that we may want.
Well, I'm not sure that, I think that my understanding is that you're going to just be looking and find out maybe what the market is. And so, and then we'd come back and say what your report back, if I'm correct in what I heard you. But that does bring up another question is, I know we're getting into the area of how you do your job, but are you going to use a headhunter, or are you going to use what kind of methodology to look? Because the reason my concern is that we're not just looking locally, we're looking all over.
Right.
For the
So-
best candidate, period, amen,
Correct. So we're going to be posting at all of those local associations as well as the national associations to look. If we do find that we're not receiving qualified candidates or candidates that we think that we even want to interview, then we would look at the option of working with a headhunter. So that could be a possibility. I don't know right now. The market could be good. So I think we'll know very shortly. Typically when we post a position, we know within 3 to 5 days of the turnaround of if we're getting a lot of candidates. So.
I know at Agua Fria that you,
Mhm.
Gina, you probably know, right? That
For superintendent, they typically, a lot of boards will access a headhunter or a firm to help them with the recruitment process for superintendent level. Typically for, executive directors and deputies, they usually try to go out first to see and then access, a firm if needed. And that I could do on my own. I wouldn't have to come back to you to access
Right.
that piece because the fee would be under the possible amount. So might have to go through a procurement process just depending on what the fee would be.
was just a hunch, but it sounds to me that we really have critical issues you want to deal with here, with that. I mean, everybody agrees academics, we want to, we need to really hit things hard. So I don't know what the headhunter is, a headhunter a year's salary or was a huge amount of money or what. It sounds to me like it might be worth going that route, easy to say it's not my money, but I think for the district, I think everybody would see that as reasonable. So I don't know how, we don't want to get caught up in a big formality that, that we're limited by, how, what we're looking for and what we want to do because of the urgency.
Right.
And my understanding, Superintendent Gunning, is that if this position is approved, you will post it tomorrow.
Mhm.
So we will know by the next board meeting if we need to take some other sort of steps, if you're not getting
Right.
adequate resumes.
As well
correct?
as I could let you know what steps we've had taken if there was
Okay.
something needed.
Isn't it true though, that if you go to a headhunter, I mean, you can at least do a little shopping, right? You do you sign up with a headhunter like you're selling a house where you have to sign a contract and whoever you hire? I don't think you have to end up hiring through them, but
You don't
do a
necessarily
little
have
shopping,
to. No, you don't necessarily have to. It depends on probably the agreement that you sign with them, but it can also, depending on those agreements, could delay the process. Like I want to post immediately, get the word out, because this is the time where we've already missed some candidates that have moved from out of state into those higher level positions. So we have to get moving.
I agree. We don't want to
quickly,
wait.
yeah.
You should post tomorrow if
So,
we approve it.
yeah.
But I'm saying at the same time, can you throw
Yeah.
out feelers to a headhunter or to saying this is what we're looking
could-
for,
could
for them to
definitely
be
look
on the
into that.
alert, because they
Mhm.
may just come up and say, hey, we got somebody perfecto bingo, and you can go act on that, and then we can worry about the details of approving, the structure or whatever. That's what I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be limited to.
No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Honak. Do any other board members have questions or points of discussion on the proposed job description and position? Hearing no further discussion, I will entertain a motion.
I will move to approve the new position and job description of Deputy Superintendent of Academic Success as presented.
I second.
Hearing a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda is item 1D, certified personnel resignation, release of contract, retirement, and non-renewals, presented by Monica. More formally known as Monica Sanders, Director of Human Resources.
You might.
Madam President, members of the board, this evening, we present to you the certified items to approve. Was it the employment positions or the terminations? I'm sorry, what did you announce? I don't have the agenda in front of me.
The first item on the agenda is the resignations.
Resignations. Yes, so we bring forward this item for approval as presented.
I had one question, just in general, and not about these items specifically, but I know that our policy, or maybe it's a regulation, that if, we have certified staff that are under contract but are seeking employment elsewhere in terms of a promotion or higher salary, we typically release them from that contract if, all is sort of on the up and up. Is there in the policy, is there a time frame in which they have to give us? Especially I'm just seeing, some teachers here that are literally, giving us 9 or 10 days notice, which seems very quick to exit a classroom, even if that is an awesome opportunity. So do we have any sort of district guidelines in place that says, yes, we want you to move on to greener pastures, if you will, but we also expect a certain amount of professional courtesy to help us fill that position before you leave?
We don't have specific language spelled out. Where that would belong is the employment contracts. So we don't have liquidated damages clauses in our contracts. So that's where that would belong if we wanted to impose that or set tighter guidelines and communicate that better.
Okay, might just be a future thought. I don't know about damages per se, but I understand what you mean by that in terms of putting that in a clause. It might be a future, just in terms of a respectable time limit to give us, especially if you're in a teaching position and we're unable to fill that in a 7 to 10 day time period, which would be awesome if we could, but usually is not the case. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a question. There was a teacher from Verado Heritage resigned to take a position, I believe, with the city of Wendell or something like.
Promotional opportunity. Mhm.
Is that what you're calling that, a promotional opportunity?
Yes, well, we categorize promotional, medical reasons, moving out of state, maybe a spouse had a job transfer.
Leaving halfway through the second semester. This is a 5th grade teacher, and they're going to go to work, I believe, as a transportation education program manager for the city of Phoenix. So we're calling that a promotion. I call it a breach of contract.
So yes, Superintendent Gunning did review the request, and if we were reporting a breach of contract, we would have denoted that person's name on the agenda as a
I know
report
that.
of that.
I understand you note it and it's sent to the board, state board. My opinion is it's a breach of contract. Am I missing something?
When we looked at that position, it is a promotion because it's a higher level position. So we did not see that as a lateral move in that role.
Promotion outside the education field.
Yes, but it's still linked to education.
I read the letter.
Yeah.
That's pretty weak. But I'll,
And we've
to
had,
me, to me, I
yeah.
would have reported to the state as a breach of contract.
we've had
But-
people that have moved outside of education, but still it's a promotion. It's a higher salary, higher compensation, and we would not want to hold somebody back from pursuing other career opportunities that were a higher
I
level.
will give it up to this individual. They've been here apparently since 2008. So I don't want to persecute anybody, but I also leaving in March in a critical time of year when we're trying to achieve academic success, improve our test scores. It really is a red flag for me. I'm going to tell you right now. And but that's enough said. I'll take your judgment on that. I disagree with you, but also I see we've got a young teacher that's going to take over. What's her name? Allison is going to take over as a from a sub to.
Dr. Dowling, I believe that's the next agenda item. Would you mind holding on to that question?
You're right.
Thank
You
you.
did well. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Do any board members have, no problem. Do any board members have any other questions or points of discussion on the certified personnel resignation and release of contracts?
Just one quick question is if they are reported to the board, like a breach of contract, what does that mean? Does that make it hard for them to be rehired in the educational network?
Possibly. It's up to that board to determine if they remove their certification or not.
Oh, I see. They could lose their
Right. They
certification.
can
Okay.
lose their certification, which would mean that they would not be able to
Teach.
teach in a public school. They could teach in charter or private.
Yeah, but it's tough. It's a
Right,
dang. Yeah, I
right,
get it.
right.
It's all from.
Excellent. Then I will move to approve certified personnel resignation, release of contract, retirement, non-renewals as presented.
I second.
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now move on to agenda item 1E, certified personnel employment position change with new contracts renewals. Director
Matt?
Sanders?
Madam President, members of the board, we present this item, employment position change with new contract renewals of certified personnel as presented.
Dr. Dowling, I believe you have a question.
Yes, I just a comment. Just a comment. We got a young teacher. I believe that she moved. Was she a sub? She was a sub going to move into the. This is the teacher at Tom Heck.
Correct. This was a teacher who was one of the 4 that I believe we approved district-wide, who is now certified to be a 3rd grade teacher.
Good. More power to her.
Mhm.
Well, actually 8th grade science. This is Alec, right?
Correct.
8th grade science.
That individual was a classified personnel. She was an aide,
She was a classroom aide.
classroom aide,
Yeah, I
mhm,
guess I
and
missed
is certified to
Yeah,
teach in that.
there's 2 different
assignment.
ones. The first one is the classroom aide, the second one is the contracted substitute.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think you were right,
Yeah,
that one of them
I-
was, but yeah,
I was looking at the 8th grade science teacher. That was
Oh,
the one
okay.
who was an aide, right?
okay.
Yes.
What was that person in an 8th grade science class as an aide?
I am not sure where that person was.
My point being, well, we've got to provide some support. 8th grade science, the last 2 months, just a quick story. When I did my student teaching, of course, I was older. I think I was, not going to tell you how old I was, but it was a career change. It wasn't that big of an issue, but I did a March, April, May, 8th grade class, US Arizona history. It was brutal. And it was me. My teacher just took off. I've got a teacher here, student teacher. I'm gone. I never saw the guy for 8 weeks. But anyway, my point being, I hope we provide a lot of support to this young teacher in the 8th grade science class. I see
Yes.
things like this and I get concerned. If I could go in there and help her out, I would.
And we have coaches available to provide that direct support.
I figured you did. I just wanted to make sure that I said something.
And I know that all of our principals, our middle school principals specifically, provide extra supports to our math and science teachers in 7th and 8th grade because they are very hard to come by. And when we get good people, we do everything we can to keep them. Any other questions or comments on item 1E?
Is the 8th grade science teacher, the one with the initials AT, the first one? Am I looking at the right thing?
Yes,
With her resume?
yes. Mhm.
Okay. And then the other is one with the K, I don't know whether to say the name or not. KJ is taking what position?
It's the Verado Elementary School,
The third
the
grade.
third grade teacher. Mhm.
Okay. Okey-doke. Okay, I see.
I will entertain a motion to approve.
I motion to approve the certified personnel employment position change with new contract renewals as presented.
A second?
Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director Sanders. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
I motion to adjourn the special meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Honak. Having a first and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Special meeting is now adjourned. I will now call to order the study session of the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board. First on that agenda item is item 3A. I'm sorry, 3A is call to order. 3B is health insurance overview for our medical, dental, vision, and life policies, which will be presented by Director Sanders.
Madam President, members of the board, this evening, we bring back to you our annual health insurance overview. And it will be in two parts. I will be presenting the first part, and I'm also joined today by Monica Zook with Meritain Health. Mike Owings could not be here unexpectedly, so we have Monica. We have the Monicas tonight, once again. So I'm going to be reviewing our medical, dental, vision, and life benefits that we offer to our eligible employees district-wide. For medical, we offer Meritain Health through Asbate, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Asbate throughout this presentation. Also going to cover dental. Dental, we use Delta Dental as our provider through Valley Schools, as well as vision through Valley Schools, and our vision provider is United Healthcare. And our life plan is offered through Meritain Asbate, and that provider is Horace Mann. So the benefits we offer our employees align with our strategic plan under the people pillar by maintaining a high retention rate of employees and fostering an environment that promotes health and wellness. Litchfield is a longstanding member of Asbate. Asbate was established in 1981 by the Arizona School Boards Association. Asbate serves 2/3 of Arizona schools with over 25,000 members, and those members include employees as well as family members. Our rate history, as you can tell here, we have an outstanding rate renewal history with Asbate Medical. Over 17 years in the single digits at 4% or close to 5%. For 21-22, we had no increase to all three of our medical plans, which is the current year we're in. And we think you'll be satisfied with the announcement coming at the end of this presentation with the increase for next year. This is just a snapshot of what our numbers look like for employee eligibility. There was some interest in the past from our board as to like how many people, how many certified, classified, just What does that look like for each of our employee groups? And so we're presenting here that information. So this, our medical benefits are offered to our employees who work 30 hours or more, and this is a federal mandate under the ACA, or the Affordable Care Act, that was enacted in March of 2010. And next, these are the
I have
three.
a question on
Whoops.
that last
Yes.
slide.
Can go back. Go ahead.
Okay, so the way I read this, we have 1,015 people who have signed up for at least something.
This is eligibility only.
Okay,
Um,
how many are eligible and what percentage is that 1,015?
You know, Dr. Dowling, I didn't bring percents tonight for that, but I am going to show you in the coming slides what enrollment actually looks like.
I knew
Mhm.
you were going to do that. So
Thank you.
I was helping you out.
These are the three medical plans that we offer through Meritain Health. We have three plans. We have a copay gold. That is one of our most robust plans because there is no deductible with that plan. It is a grandfathered plan. We grandfathered this plan prior to July 1st of 2014, when we experienced an 8% increase at that time. And we knew that we could no longer continue to really afford that. Right now, the district contributes a certain amount towards each of the plans. And we really needed to see some migration over to the classic gold and the high deductible health plan. And we are starting to see that. So many of those employees that are in that copay gold are, have been employees obviously prior to 2014. So we had to introduce that at that time. We also offer a regular copay style plan called the Classic Gold, and the deductible is pretty reasonable. As you can see, individual annually is $240 per year. And then we also offer a high deductible health plan with a nice health savings account deposit that we make to our employees, HSA account or health savings account. And that amount is currently $1,486 that we deposit into their account annually. And they're able to use that amount to pay for qualifying expenses, pay for those discounted doctor visits that they're seeing when they go to the doctor. And so as well as RX, there's a lot of ways that you can use that money.
That 1,400 is that's up front.
It's per pay period. They get it every pay period that a deduction is being, it's over 21 pays. So it's not fronted. It's not a full amount fronted. And then employees can choose with restriction to the maximum limits per year. They can choose to direct their own monies from their employee paycheck into that health savings account. And all of our plans have preventative benefits at 100% coverage. For example, our flu shots, we bring those each year to all of our sites on site. And we just had our on-site mammograms with the Mommobile. And we have excellent participation in those preventative benefits that we're seeing each year. As well as Teladoc. We started Teladoc in 2019-2020 school year. We are seeing some increase enrollment with that as well. And, especially during COVID, I think it was definitely an added convenience for people to be able to just pick up the phone and make that scheduled appointment virtually with a doctor. Other medical plan highlights, just some of the other perks that we see with Aggregate or with Meritain is we do have access to an employee assistance program. The nice thing about our EAP is that it is offered to all employees, not just those of us that are enrolled in a medical plan. So we have access to 5 counseling services, confidential services, ranging anywhere from family to financial. We promote this information and we share out with our employees, what's available to them. Around the holiday time, they offer a Safe Ride program, so we like to push that as well. We have ongoing communication with Ken Downey. He is the contact person with Alliance Work Partners, I think they're called. And he was happy to report that we are experiencing an 8% utilization rate with all of our employees. And he indicated that we are higher than the ASBATE 6% average in terms of utilizing our EAP. I mentioned that we brought the mammograms to our sites, and we had 115 employees participate in that this year. And we have upcoming our biometric screenings. That's when we have to fast in the morning. We're not supposed to eat. Our blood gets drawn, and then we get to receive results electronically and via the mail, just to look and see how there's like a panel. It's a screening panel that results in provides you kind of where do you stand? Are you at risk for high cholesterol? There's a lot of things that it gives us, and helps us track from year to year. Just how are we doing? Are we underweight? Are we overweight? And just ways to help increase and just be better with our health. We also offer a $20 stipend for any employee who participates in the health evaluation or biometric screening each year. And then Meritain offers a nurse health coaching 24/7 nurse line. And then this is really helpful for employees who have chronic health conditions. Next is enrollment. So I wanted to show you here where we're at with enrollment. And these are our current numbers. And in the coming slides, we're going to look at where we were at last year and where we're at today. And as you can tell, you can see which plan, what the employer cost is for each plan. We do contribute the same amount for each plan. And the employee cost for the copay gold, our employees do pay is $708 currently annually. And it is zero cost to employee for the classic gold as well as the high deductible health plan, which also, as I mentioned, that high deductible health plan includes that $1,458 health savings account deposit. This is a look at our dental, vision, and life benefits. Our dental benefits are very important to us, and 100% is covered for preventative care, which includes exams and cleanings and x-rays. Vision, that is provided through United Healthcare. Now, our vision insurance is not paid by the district. No portion of that is. It's fully 100% paid by employees. And they get a great benefit plan there with only having to pay $10 for exams. And they can see any provider if they decide to go outside of the preferred provider to get that $10 exam copay. They just have to submit a claim to get reimbursed for whatever they paid. And life insurance, each year we conduct open enrollment annually. And so our employees have an opportunity to ensure that their beneficiary is up to date and current. We ask them to provide a name, so we're able to have that most current information for them. Life insurance is a $15,000 life and accidental death and dismemberment benefit. So here you can see what the cost is for dental, vision, and life. So compared to last year, our dental numbers did decrease from 530 to 489. Our decreases are because of our staffing reductions, as well as we noticed we did have an increase in people waiving coverage. Mm-hmm. Again, we do open enrollment annually online, and so there is an option to either select the benefit if you're eligible or to select waive coverage. So those that are waiving may be choosing to, stay on with their spouse's coverage. Maybe that coverage is better. So this is a sheet that we presented last year. I really thought it was important to present it this evening. So this was March 30th of last year. So at that time, we had presented what the costs would be for medical. And this included the 30 FTE staff reductions that we were anticipating this year. And in looking at what those rates were last year, and last year we did not have an increase with medical. So when we estimated the cost, the estimation resulted in 6.9 million that the district needed to plan for in contributing costs towards medical, dental, and life, as well as teledoc. And this next slide shows you with strike through the most updated enrollment numbers. So same slide, but with updated numbers. So right now we have estimated that our cost actually went down to 6.6 million. And this next slide here shows you the savings or difference that we are going to notice based on enrollment numbers changing from last year compared to now. And so we're looking at a savings of 344,674. And on March 15th, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes on with open enrollment. And so we are hoping to bring forward on March 15th a recommendation to approve the medical, dental, and vision and life benefits. That would include any employee cost, employer cost, finalization on that, so we can proceed with our plan for scheduling open enrollment. And before I turn it over to Maritine, I'll take any questions or comments.
I have two questions, if you don't mind if I start. First is, in the reductions that you show on the financial impact slide, the 21-22 estimated cost, where you show at 6.6 million, the savings because of the reduction in employees. You mentioned that this is based on enrollment of 218, but in the next couple of presentations, as we go into the budget, we'll see that we're going to be adding positions next year, hopefully, if we can. Does that take into account these, or we're really just saving that as of today, but any positions that we add, we're really just going to be right back up to the 6.6 million, most likely?
So yes, what you're seeing in this slide is just a savings based on actual enrollment numbers that went down. So then I would think Wendy can kind of speak to whatever number you'll be looking at when those budget discussions are had tonight.
Okay. I mean, insurance and savings are usually not in the same sentence, so it's great to see that we're having some kind of savings. I'm just not too excited because I think we're about to give that right back with some new positions, so I understand. The second question I have is, earlier this year, I think at the end of last year, when we discussed some changes to salary and benefits to our transportation services, we also discussed doing, forgive me now, I don't remember if it was life benefits or dental or vision, or doing some kind of study and adding those benefits. Was that done? And will there be any option of adding those additional benefits to that group of folks?
So I just went to the slide here that denotes who's eligible. So as you can tell right now, our student transporters are eligible for medical and life. Our monitors or transportation monitors are within the medical only line. So they can only receive medical only. So that would be something that would have to be discussed if we were to loop in the transportation monitors with our transporters.
I think I think we said we were going to do that. So that's why I'm questioning now. And I believe now, looking at this, I believe maybe it was adding dental and or medical going to medical and life, and then medical life going to medical life and dental. I don't know, Jody, maybe you can help me. I don't remember the exact ones there, but I think that we did say we were going to look into that. So I do want to at least make sure that we reviewed those costs. And if we're saying we can't do it for a certain reason, let's discuss why. But if we can, then I'd like to at least have that conversation.
So the transportation transporters do have the medical coverage. The monitors also have medical coverage if they're working 7 hours a day or more than 6 hours a day. So most of the monitors also have health insurance.
Okay.
In the budget discussion on the spreadsheet that I provided for you, there is a amount in there if we were to add dental to the student transporters, which is what they asked for last November, December.
Okay, perfect. We'll talk about it in the next presentation. Thank you.
So maybe I'm missing, why is that not on this slide right here, that the transporters have medical coverage?
Transporters, they do. So they are denoted as having medical as well as life insurance. So our transportation monitors or bus aides, they fall under the medical only line.
Oh, I guess I'm looking.
So they're denoted with 2 stars. I mean, they're not really spelled out because the transporters happen to be in their own, they're in their own tier. Transporters are the only ones that get medical and life. And so we have a lot of other employees who fall within the range of 30 to 39 hours, which is where our transportation monitors or bus aides, that's where they fall in the asterisk with the 2 stars, the 2 asterisk marks.
Okey doke, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Director Sanders? Thank
Okay.
you. This has been very informative, and we will utilize this information in our budget discussion later in this meeting.
Thank you. And next is Monica Zook. Monica, she's with Meritain and she's going to present the rest for you.
Good evening. Again, it's the Monica's back in action. But Madam President, governing board members, it's great to be back here. I was the account manager at Litchfield for 7 years. So unfortunate Mike couldn't be here tonight, but I'm happy to be able to present to you all. So I'll go ahead and get started. Monica already covered some of this, so I won't bore you, but something I always like to remind everyone when I come to Litchfield is Barbara Roby actually started the Aggregate Trust as well. And to this day, it is still run by business managers, superintendents, and governing board members of school districts. So it really we put the school in the front of everything we do. Today, I'm just going to cover financial performance and utilization, some COVID vaccine reporting, a little bit about what's new, and then your renewal and strategy for this upcoming plan year. So this slide has a lot of numbers on it. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better up close and personal. But essentially what this is called a medical loss ratio, which is really just a fancy term for how much premium is coming in versus how much claims is coming out. If those 2 numbers is equal, it'd be 100%. We don't ever want to see that. We want to see that number right around 80%. This past plan year, you're running at about 86%, which is not terrible. But it is important to keep in mind this doesn't take into consideration admin costs, trends, expenses, those sort of things. That's why we like it right around that 80 to keep that buffer from year to year, and then truly make sure that your claims are funded appropriately by your premium. So this next slide is a little bit already about what Monica discussed. I always find it interesting though to see your claims truly drive your increases, also when they're balanced with the ASBATE pool. So that's why you have the benefit of those almost 20,000 members to really support those waves and good years and bad years, because we all know we all have good years and bad years. So you can kind of see that reflected on, when you're running 101%, you got a 10% increase. Last year, you were running better in the 80s and had a pass. Now, with that in mind, we always do need to remember that little thing called trend, which is really just our word for inflation. And we all know that inflation is big these days. Industry-wise, medical trend this year, the brokers are saying is about 7%. ASBATE's, I'm happy to report, is much lower than that. ASBATE had a great year overall and actually ended up net, had a huge net surplus this year. So as a benefit of that, you'll benefit as well, even though your loss ratio is trending up slightly. Again, lots of numbers on this slide. I won't go too into them, but I think it's really important to see what is a claim these days. Back when I started, over $15,000 claim was a big claim. Now, we see $400,000, $200,000 claims, $1 million claims, especially when you start, I'll get into the prescriptions in a little bit later, but We've all seen the ads on TV. Specialty meds are wonderful because they cure people, but also they could cost $20,000, $30,000 a month. So when you're balancing that with premium costs, that's what insurance is for ultimately, but that's driving a lot of the cost. Your professional claims, your preventive care claims, and what I mean by that is doctor visits, have all increased this year and are a large portion of your overall budget. And that is by nature of 2020. A lot of people obviously weren't able to go get the care that they needed or didn't feel comfortable for whatever reasons, obviously COVID. So we're seeing an uptick in that, which is good. You know, we want people to go get their preventive care, find things out that are wrong with them so that we can catch those early before they develop into those big problems. So you will see some of those numbers tick up, but that's not really what drives cost. It's really pharmacy and it's really big claims, you know.
Question.
Yes.
With the pharmacy claims, it says high cost of brand name drugs. Is there, why aren't generic drugs, or explain that?
So brand name drugs is really just a fancy term for nothing that's been made generic yet. Specialty falls into that category, which is why it's such a huge, it's a really small portion of your amount of scripts, but it's a high portion of your total overall spend.
So these are new drugs that still have a patent, I guess, is basically what it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a lot of
It's
specialty drugs.
unavoidable.
Unfortunately, although I guess I should say, yes, it's unavoidable. However, there are drugs where people can sometimes decide not to take a generic, and that's always something we want to continue to drive with member education. If there's a generic available, take it. It's going to save you and the plan ultimately. Obviously, the doctor has to prescribe it, has to be appropriate, but typically that's one good way to control costs.
Somebody needs a chemistry lesson.
Right? I'm not qualified for that, but yes. Okay. As Monica mentioned earlier, you added Teladoc in 1920, which was a really great benefit. I know I've heard from members at Litchfield in my meetings that they've really appreciated that addition. It also has saved you in this period projected $128,000. That's just on your non-high deductible health plans. If you look at the upticks in the bars, it does kind of reflect some of those aligned with COVID. You know, when COVID went up, people were calling and using the Teladoc services, which is a great benefit to your members. So for the non-high deductible health plan, you have 344 people registered. Again, we can't control everything, but we can get the word out to get more people registered, because if you're like me, you're not going to wait till you're sick to go and register. If you do it beforehand, you're much more likely to use the services. Something else great about your Teladoc is it also covers all dependents, even if they're not on the medical plan. So if someone can't afford to cover their children or whatnot, they do still get access to the Teladoc benefit.
I'm sorry, are the Teladoc visits, what is the cost to the consumer?
It's
For
free.
It's free.
For the copay gold and the classic gold, but because of government rules, first dollar amounts cannot be paid for things that are not preventive on high deductible health plans.
Okay.
So they have to pay a copay, which is like $40, but or I think maybe 49 now, but it's much cheaper than having actually go into an office visit typically for a high deductible health plan member.
I just want to clarify something that you said really quickly, because I was not aware of this, and hopefully all of our employees are. So if I am a member on any one of the three plans, really, and I participate in our healthcare program, but my family does not, my child is sick, I can call as the member. They can receive care through Teladoc. I either pay the copay if I'm on the high deductible plan, I don't pay the copay, my child sees a physician, all is good.
Correct. You would
That's
need to go in and
fantastic.
register all of them.
Mhm.
Like if you
As a
have, if
dependent,
you got
right,
5
sure.
kids, you got to put them all in there beforehand, but yes. they would
Yeah,
have
that's
access.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's wonderful service that we have. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Oh, everyone's favorite topic. So COVID reporting. a high level, just a little bit about how your membership is vaccinated. These are only ones that come through as medical claims. We can't report on anything that doesn't come through our plan. You have 827 members vaccinated, 188 with both fully vaccinated and the booster, 420 are fully vaccinated, no booster, and 219 are partially vaccinated. And then it breaks it down further by if they got it at a pharmacy or the blue. I think the blue is medical. Yeah, pharmacy is yellow, and also by age range. And then there's some of the top locations where people are receiving their vaccinations as well listed. There's a big blank space on this next slide, and I have the pleasure to share with you that although your loss ratio is trending up, and I know it made Superintendent Gunning and Ms. Paul's a little nervous probably, because the ASBATE pool is running so well, the increase this year will be at 3%, which is, although an increase, much lower than average medical trend in the industry and in general, compared to inflation and everything that's going on out there. So obviously something to think about in your budgeting discussions.
That 3%, that's across the board. I mean, dental,
Sorry, just medical.
just medical. That's all we're talking about right now.
Yep. Lots of small numbers on this page too. I'll just draw your attention to the yellow ones. That's where we made plan changes this year. The reason behind this plan changes is historically it was for the high deductible health plan. Remember I said you had to have deductible first for anything non-preventive, and then you had to pay a percentage of coinsurance, and it used to be 20%. We found that it kind of scared some members away from jumping on the high deductible health plan, because 20% of what? Like 20% of 500, 20% of 200, what am I really going to be paying? So we changed a lot of those numbers to deductible then copay, just to make it a little easier for members to maybe join the plan or understand how the plan works. Monica kind of already went over your breakdown in different categories. You do have over 160 people still on that copay gold plan, and your classic gold is really the most popular. And that's most of what I had for you. What do you have for me?
Is this, what percentage is the participation of overall, just approximately? Do you know? I'm just curious.
I want to say it was 1,100 total eligible. Is that what you had? Not that good at math, but let's see. Six,
Sounds
seven,
like roughly 80%.
Yeah,
somewhere
kind
in
of.
there,
Yeah.
I can report that back.
No, this is close enough. I just want to get an idea. It's close enough.
What is the average increase across the board? I mean, I know we're at 3%. What is the average increase for districts across the state?
Within ASBATE, I believe it's 5% this year.
Okay, so we're a little below average. Good news. Okay.
And ASBATE is a pool, basically.
Correct.
Okay,
Mm-hmm. Yep. We got about 2/3 of all the districts in the state of Arizona.
I see. Big.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it. And
Thank you. It was nice to see you again.
yes.
Yes, thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation. I have one question for Director Sanders. Can you please explain to us the process that we use to educate our employees on the benefits that are available and how we can increase participation and understanding in things like pre-registering for Teladoc and using the employee assistance program? I understand that the 8% is higher than the state average of 6%, but knowing the current teacher burnout rate and what a lot of our families are dealing with, I would love to see that be even higher. And I just want to make sure that our employees are aware and that we're doing all that we can to make sure that they know those benefits are available.
Yes, so I came up here because I wanted to talk more about Teladoc and just to let you know that we have an employee insurance portal that we can use to specifically send out information to those that are enrolled in our medical plan to remind them, this benefit is available to you. It's free to you if you're on the copay gold and classic gold. And then there's a separate special flyer for those that are on the high deductible health plan. So it looks like we need to continue to promote that regularly to our employees. This evening, I do have our benefits coordinator, Sarah Mikos. She's joined us tonight. She just started with us, so I'll have her just do a little wave back there. But Sarah and I, we will both be collaborating with Mike Owens, our account manager, to talk through some more about maybe coming up with some virtual trainings. We haven't really ever experienced a whole lot of success with employee meetings or staff meetings after school. So we have to come up with creative ways to make it convenient for our staff. So that is something that we plan to do, in collaboration with Mike Owens.
And do we ever utilize one of our early release days or in-service days to have this type of discussion?
We have not done that. And so we would have to discuss, with the cabinet just to see, if there would be interference with what's already happening on our campuses or what's already planned for. But it's something we can look into.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, obviously, as we all know that these benefits can help each employee that we have. So it seems to me that would be a very valuable use of our time. I understand that we have other things that we do PD on and things like that in those time frames. But if we're not having success with before or after school meetings with trying to get the word out on these programs, it might be good to utilize some of that time to make sure that we are giving a consistent message on these programs.
Yes, thank you. And I did also want to add, Dr. Dowling, I think you may have kind of asked this regarding dental and vision. We will not have any increase for dental and vision for next year. So no increase.
I had a comment just to what Ms. Moran said is that I think we're paying for it regardless. And so bragging about it is a good idea, honestly. I mean, that's what we should really be doing, is bragging about it. And maybe it's not formal, meetings and times, because I don't think anybody wants to go to an extra meeting. But maybe just a little handout every now and then or something like that. Printing paper, I think, works, or emails, or, with some bright colors on it, shiny.
And Monica's department has done a great job with emails. I receive an email because just as being a member, probably biweekly on something in regards to health or our benefits. The other component is we mention and share benefits information in Superintendent's Advisory Council on an ongoing basis, as well as we have meetings with First Financial. Even though it is talking about options for supplemental components, they do review your current plan. So it's a one-on-one meeting that they sit down and confirm, like, here's what you currently have, and then here are some additional options. So it's another session or component to reinforce the benefits that are available to every employee.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Director Sanders. Next up on our agenda is the career development presentation by Executive Director DeCoste.
President Moran, members of the board, thank you. I'm here to give you an overview of our career development program. And I'm just presenting this information to you tonight. Some of it is new to our newer board members. And we've done this annually about this time of the year. It also gives you an opportunity to give some feedback. We have a career development committee meeting this week. So prior to meeting with them, I like to know what's important to you and what your interests are. Here's our strategic plan, and here's how we're aligned to our strategic plan. Teacher award compensation is partially dependent on student growth and academic achievement. So that's our student success piece. And teachers feel valued for being compensated for achieving their career development goals, and their teacher leader projects help our teachers grow as leaders. It's best for kids because it continually grows the instructional effectiveness of each teacher using student data to drive instruction and performance compensation. So the costs are will come along in the rest of the presentation. It impacts about 516 teachers, 34 instructional coaches, 10 student advisors, and our third grade teachers in Title I schools, 15 of those. So what that means is those are all of the people that are eligible for career development. There are two parts to our career development. There's this first piece we're going to talk about, which is funded through our maintenance and operation budget. And then the other piece where teachers have an input on, which is funded by the Classroom Site Fund, formerly known as the 301 plan. So Career Ladder Program was around back in 1985, and it was phased out from 2011 to 2015. And at that time, the Litchfield district absorbed some of the career ladder compensation into the maintenance and operation budget to continue career development for teachers, also known as our performance pay. So these were the estimated costs for last year's career development. And like I said, these come out of our maintenance and operation budget. We have teachers on 4 different levels. Level 1, when you're coming in new to the district, regardless of how much experience you have, you start on level 1. If you have 3 or more consecutive years in a district prior to coming here, the second year you're here, you'll be eligible to move up to level 3. Otherwise, if you're a new teacher or you're a teacher that had less than 3 years experience somewhere else, you move up the ladder of the 1A, B, or 1, 2A, 2B up to level 3. So here are the components. Observation and evaluation, all teachers have that. Student growth component and reflection, all teachers have that, levels 1 through 3. Teacher leader projects are for teachers in level 3 only. Performance pay. Now, again, this is M&O. So this is the piece before we get to Classroom Site Fund, where we'll talk about the goals that they try to achieve throughout the year. So the level 1 performance pay is $1,540. 2A is $2,200, 2B is $3,300, and level 3 is $4,400. And those are for meeting certain criteria on the evaluation piece of the teacher evaluation. And here's an example of that right here, where you'll see standards 1 through 4, which I think was the last board meeting, we talked about the teacher evaluation and making some modifications to that for next year. So you can see the amount of points that are needed to achieve levels 1 through 3. TLPs are only applicable for level 3 teachers. Teacher action plans for student growth we're no longer doing those. But it was hard for me to get a snippet of somebody's from this year, so. Okay. And then what level they're compensated at. So that would go back to, if you're compensated at level 2B, you would get the $3,300 and $300. Okay. Quick summary of that. And then the 301 award funded from the Classroom Site Fund, authorized under Prop 301. I used 301 a lot in that slide. I need to fix that. So we have the 2 goals that were approved by the board last year that teachers are working towards this year. That's the professional contributions goal, where they are doing 15 hours of professional development and or 15 hours of community contribution or another 15 hours of PD. And that's, if they reach that goal, that's $2,000. And then the student growth coefficient and reflection on student growth is another $2,000. And then that's where that falls in another section of the teacher evaluation form, is marking whether they met those goals or not.
Tina, before you go on, just while you're on
Sure.
the slide, so I know you answered this question for me before, so I apologize for
That's
having
okay.
to ask it again. So the other level of employees, the coaches, behavior coaches, instructional coaches, that kind of thing, I know that their eligibility is a little bit different, but we want to include them here.
Mhm.
Can you remind me, because their student growth coefficient, obviously they don't, they don't have a classroom where they would have specific children. How,
Mhm.
what is the differences there about and how they're compensated and still be able to participate in this?
They do a student growth piece also. They will attach themselves to a grade level in most cases, or a certain group of kids, and then help foster the growth of that group of students throughout the year and track their growth.
So that's predetermined at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
And then they
Mhm.
decide, okay, I'm going to third grade, whatever. And then by the end of the year, they do that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yes. Okay. So if you're familiar with the classroom site fund, there were several different pots. So we're still going with the different pots of money. And then, so 40% of the classroom site fund, that's line 012. There's is it 11, 12, and 13, or 10, 11, and 12? Oh. Okay, 11, 12, and 13 are the pots of money, and we added 14, Ms. Quall said, for the one-time pay that we did. Okay. So I just wanted to review this with you, and then we go back to our committee. We usually talk about it, make some minor changes. We were at our last meeting, we did not talk about making any changes to the performance awards for next year. So they would continue to be what you see here. And then we update our career development document. That comes back to you guys in July for approval. And we move on to the next year. So I'm happy to entertain questions and comments, because I know it's.
I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Is it still, the pots are 40, 40, 20? That's the way I remember it.
So it was 20, 40, 40. However, in April of last year, it was approved that you had flexibility and you no longer had to use the 20, 40, 40. But we chose to continue with that just to honor the base pays and the performance pay, but that is not a requirement anymore.
Have we used the proficiency goals that we publish every year? I assume we publish them every year, don't we? We have, these are the goals we're going to have for proficiency for next year, i.e. we're going to go from 29% for 8th grade math to 38.
Our teachers use our student benchmark data. So they use the beginning of the year benchmark data and the end of the year benchmark data to measure their student growth for the student growth performance indicators here, because that's the data that we have in time to close out the school year. We don't have AZ Merit typically until after school is already out.
But you could, if you tied it to the state assessment, you could pay that portion at whenever you get that data and calculate it, and you could pay it with the understanding that this will not be paid until all the information is there. We'll pay it in August, or we used to pay it in August, that one portion.
We do
because
link,
of the scores.
we do link their school letter grade. So from the previous year, so the last year school letter grade is attached to their eval and a part of that process too.
Was there ever any thought of having a school-wide, some kind of a portion of this money would be based on school-wide performance, since everybody, in essence, a English teacher working together with the math and the social studies and the science, working together to achieve a school-wide proficiency level.
We talked about that years ago, but we found that the most powerful thing was where they had total control, which is in their classroom and with their students. And so we found the greatest impact and effect of them tracking and setting their growth expectations and monitoring that in their own students, but linking also a component to that letter grade of showing that you're accountable and that growth that you're making within your class affects your letter grade for your entire campus.
Yeah, but there's
And
nothing-
also for
it
K1,
is tied to
2.
the letter grade, a portion of it is?
Yes.
So
Okay.
there are points on the evaluation, and I wish I had that presentation from last time I could show you, but we have, when they're calculating student growth, they're calculating their grade levels. They get points for their grade level student growth, and then their own class level student growth, and then their school-wide school label is calculated in there too. So there are points for all three of those categories on one teacher evaluation.
Okay. Can I see a copy of that?
Sure.
The matrix that you're using for.
Yes, it should be in board docs. We had them, we went over them at our last meeting,
Yeah.
but we'll
Yeah,
print
it's
it.
the teacher evaluation that we
Yeah,
went over
yeah.
in the last one. We had some
Mhm. Yeah,
questions and comments and we went through that. Yeah.
I remember that.
And then to clarify, we pay this out in June, not in August. So we do calculate it at the end of the year and pay it in June.
Yeah, the point I was making was that because of the state assessment the data wasn't, we didn't get it until the summertime. So it was an understanding, the teachers understood that until we got that, we could not calculate their portion that was influenced or impacted by the state scores.
Okay.
So they knew that they would be paid in August.
So our teachers are paid in June.
I know you said that.
Yes.
No, I was just saying that it can be used with the understanding that
He's
that
saying if we
portion.
used AZ merit, then we could pay them in August instead
Yeah.
of using benchmarks
Yeah.
and paying in June.
I mean, it was kind of nice when school started and you don't get a paycheck for what, almost 2 weeks? We used to, anyway,
Okay,
that's history.
thank you. It's always interesting to hear perspectives from other districts.
I've got a question. Or you go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually have two areas that I would like to get some board member feedback on. The first is last year we made the change to award the 301 performance awards based on the professional contributions goal and the student growth coefficient and reflection goals. What do you think about those two goals, or would you like to see any changes made to this particular piece? Do you
Yeah,
see those being effective?
Yeah, that was actually my question, and more just a question to Gina in terms of, I know last year we had a lot of conversation around what is appropriate for those professional contribution goal and how many hours and all of that. I know, going into this year, going into next year, there's been a lot of conversation about the requirements for teachers, and we had a lot of discussion on our calendar and how much professional development is necessary and how many, in-service days do we need. And so I'm interested to hear if, in your conversations with them, is this something that we should be thinking as a board? This is something that we can change, we can modify because the bar is too high. It's not, no, this is fine. I'm interested to hear what the committee thought about that, because I think that is one area that we could adjust if we thought that would actually help in terms of some of the teacher burnout and, us asking a little bit too much of them in terms of professional contribution. Also, I'm interested in, and Jeremy, I know you had a question too, about the attendance piece. I know that was 2 years ago now, prior to COVID. Obviously, we couldn't do it during that time. I know we are struggling mightily right now with substitute teachers, and with COVID, knock on wood, sort of on a downswing, and we're seeing much lower rates at this point. Would it be appropriate to have that conversation to bring it back where that's tied to an attendance piece, so we don't fight so hard to get those substitute teachers that we can't seem to find in our community?
So actually, yeah, thank you. And if what I really want to do is just add to your comments and question. So if you kind of zoom back to this, it looks to me like there's two components. There's what you would call a teacher perk or an excuse to give them more money to keep them happy and want to work here at LASD and stay here, which is legitimate. And then there's the student, that's the professional development, because I don't really see how that exactly equates to better, AZ merit scores. And then you've got the student growth. And I think it's really important that there be clarity in this, that which of the two it is, maybe even be separated into two different things. And maybe I'm naive, maybe something else exists, but as Superintendent Gunning just said, that it's more effective, when it really relates to the teacher's own performance as opposed to overall the district. And I think that as a board, we need to decide, how much we need to maybe there are other ways to deal with the teacher thing, the incentives for teachers to just stay here, that they don't have to go make work, go take 15 hours of this and that, whatever. Maybe there's something that is a way that we can give them the money where we don't really require them to be burdened. And as Steve Watson's survey showed, they're burnt out already. And then, which is happy. I mean, that there's a good thing. We need to do that, but then separate completely from our goal as board members and as a school district to educate our students. And the only thing we really have on that, in my opinion, is AZ merit scores. I mean, you can't do metrics on social, emotional learning or whatever. That's a whole nother issue. And we definitely want very clear incentives to our teachers to increase our academics. I mean, that's why we're here. And theoretically, they're hired as teachers. That's their job. But somehow we've drifted away from it to the point where they're so overwhelmed with other stuff. And I think we need to really get back to, no, I don't think it's what everybody thinks. I mean, really, we're going to shine if we can just increase academics, and we have a very strong lever. And I think all of us are happy to see that if we, tie that with the, even if it wrecks our budget a little bit, the money's going to come back to us with more enrollment the next year and things like that. If we really reward teachers for academic achievement, and maybe teachers are going to be happier too. I mean, they're going to want to come here and teach if they know we're really hot on it. So that to me, it just seems like it's muddled, that we should really have clarity in it with these criteria for judging teachers, that they're clearly based on academic achievement or they're just a perk. They both are valuable, but we need clarity. I think there should be clarity. I think we're going to get more cluck for the buck.
Thank you, Mr. Honak. Just to clarify, I believe what Executive Director DeCoste has pulled up here is the criteria for these $2 amounts, and that's part of their evaluation. So on the professional contributions log, they have to have at least 30 hours of professional contributions. That's going to be either a yes or a no. And then on the standard of student growth, you have to have a minimum of 18 out of 38 points. What I would like to add to this is what I also asked for last year, which I think would go hand in hand with the revamp of the evaluation. When I look at standard 6, which is the student growth coefficient and reflection portion, and our teachers have to have a minimum of 18 out of 38 points, that is 47% of the maximum points, which tells me that that bar could be higher. I would like to see on both of these, and I would like to get some board member feedback on this as well, a tiered plan to say that teachers who, for example, if the current goal is 30 hours, teachers who do 20 hours would receive a lower dollar amount. Teachers who do 30 hours would receive average dollar amount, and teachers who do 40 or more would receive more money. I would like to see similar on the student growth. Teachers who have higher growth would receive higher funding, so that this is truly a pay for performance plan, as opposed to Mr. Honak's point, another way for us to give teachers the same dollar amount. So I would like to see us reward our higher performing teachers and not penalize the lower performing teachers, but just give more reward to those who are going above and beyond.
Yeah, I like that idea that was kind of going to, and I know Jeannie didn't get a chance to answer my question, but the piece about the 30 hours of professional contributions, and maybe that's the solution that I didn't think of, is having that tiered approach so that you're not, it's not all or nothing. It's not 30 or nothing. There's some kind of, if you, I know several of them just in the beginning of the school year, and as we ramp up, they're all sort of doing a minimum number, but then they're required to sort of add to that throughout the year to make that 30 hours. So I could get on board with that tiered approach, that it's not all or nothing, that you can earn some part of that, but that the high performers are the ones that are actually earning the full amount, but the others are not being penalized. And then was there any other discussion? I know sort of the attendance piece had been on the table. Was there any other discussion that happened during that meeting, even though they weren't recommended as far as changes?
I'm getting your feedback first. Tomorrow,
Okay.
we have talked about attendance and
Oh,
career
okay.
development. We've talked about it in other meetings too with administration, and there are mixed reviews on it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that the teachers feel that attendance at this point in time still is a fair thing with COVID still lingering around. We also have, there would be some adjustments that we would have to make to the way that we did it before. I'm not sure that 70% of the people eligible for career development would vote for an attendance piece. The teachers seem to be leaning towards the end of they would like the administrators to use progressive discipline for teachers who are, missing too much work. And the administrators, and then there are those teachers that are there every day, no matter what, also kind of like the attendance piece, but we're telling everyone, if you're not feeling well, you stay home. There's no more come into school with a cold like people used to, if it's very much you stay home if you're not feeling good. So
Tell me more about progressive discipline. What does that mean for a teacher?
that would be if you miss a certain amount of days and then you get a letter or a verbal warning and then a letter after another certain amount of days and things like that. So
Is that over and above your allotted personal days that you would have? Is that what you mean?
it's a percentage of your personal days.
Okay.
Yes. A percentage of days throughout the year.
Okay, I understand. No, I don't disagree with those points, and I wouldn't say it's controversial, but I mean, I know that there's sort of positives and negatives to it. I also know as a school district that we are struggling right now, and
I know.
we don't have highly qualified teachers in every classroom because we're desperately looking for substitutes, and we've got people filling in and administrators that are filling in that are unable to do their normal day job because they're doing that. So I'm just thinking of alternate ways that we can, we've done that in the past and it's been successful. So I think it should at least just be a point of conversation, and it may not go anywhere, but at least open to that.
Might be a great opportunity for another tiered approach.
Sure.
0 to 1 day, 0 to 2 days, it's this much. If you miss 3 days,
Yeah.
if you miss
Absolutely.
5 days
Yeah.
or more, then so you have a little bit
Yeah.
of flexibility in there.
Yeah.
As opposed
I like the idea of flexibility. I mean, especially as we're kind of coming back to this and a tiered approach. I think we certainly don't want to overcomplicate anything. I mean, our pay scale and everything is already complicated as it is with the buckets and the this and that. So I want to keep it simple, but I am in the camp of the tiered approach. I think that might be a good solution here.
I just have, I'm unclear. I get what Ms. Moran is saying, and I'm kind of in agreement with everything. The thing that's just bothering me is when we talk about the 30 hours of professional development, is that a teacher taking, like they just take some class that they want to take, or what is that?
Well,
for?
that includes professional development that's job embedded. So that would include PD that they have during an early release or a full day in service. If there are times in that day where they're doing strictly PD, it's not a staff meeting, that doesn't count for professional development, but any certain types of training with math instruction or PLCs or things that they're doing, those are separated out and counted for professional development.
See, I don't know whether that's valuable because it's nothing wrong with doing it, but I mean, I would think that a teacher, if they were going to be teaching some math or something like that, they're just going to want to review it a little bit. It's going to make it easier to teach, but is it really the right way to, is it really giving the correct incentive? And I would submit that it kind of isn't, because it's kind of saying, well, you're going to get paid only if you clock in for 15 hours or whatever.
Well, it's a bit of an incentive to not leave early on an early release day, or to not call in or take a day off when we have a full day Friday in service, because you're not getting those professional development hours embedded into your job, into your workday if you're not there.
What?
And
So-
in addition, Executive Director Jacobst, isn't there another component to the professional contributions goal that would be able to include community events such as after school events? If teachers come to those and connect with the community and connect with the parents, those hours can count toward this goal as well.
Up to 15, yes. That's why we changed it from professional development to professional contributions, because we split that out where it can be all professional development, or it can be professional development and professional contributions, because many of our teachers go above and beyond. They come to the parades and they go to the games and they go to the McTeacher nights and all of these things that they are doing way outside of their school day. It's a way for us to say, thank you, we value your time and we can compensate you for that.
I think that has some value, but if an example was that a teacher, and maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but like if there's students that are, that need help and the teacher wants to spend that time tutoring or something on when there's a half day instead of going home and maybe getting a few students together. I mean, something that's kind of tied into that's going to help kids, because it's nice to have a teacher go to some event, but honestly, the teachers should go. If they want to go, they should go. If they don't want to go, they shouldn't go, and they shouldn't be going because it doesn't seem like there's a cost benefit to it that is, whereas there are many things that teachers could be doing, and they do that I think they should be rewarded for, if they stay after school for something that's.
And they do. We have a lot of teachers that use the Teacher Leader Project as a tutoring opportunity.
Yeah, I think
they're
it should be
30 hours
limited
for
to
their
that.
TLP, because now if you're looking at just these two, then you also have to remember that our level 3 teachers are eligible for a Teacher Leader Project in the other performance pay piece. And they're putting in another 30 hours of tutoring or an after school club or coding after school or different things like that to help increase student achievement. And remember, last year we changed the TLP to tie directly back to our strategic plan and student achievement.
Okay, good. Thank you for letting me know.
You're welcome.
So do you think that, based on the numbers we have, because we're starting to track this professional development now, are we feeling like this 30 hours is going to be a problem for anybody?
Just randomly polling, because I can go into the system and look at everybody's. I pulled benchmarks in January when they were due, and just looking at that, it looks like people are on track to meet those goals. But again, that's discussion for Thursday at our career development meeting as to where we are with that.
Because I would say that in that specific piece, I feel like our board has been, our teachers go above and beyond, so let's keep pushing them higher, higher, higher. And I personally, after going to the town hall with Steve Watson and the teacher burnout that we have going on, would not like to see that be increased in any way. I do agree that I love the idea of a tiered approach for academic success and being able to reward our higher performing teachers. And I think that would be a great approach for that. But I don't want to see us do this tiered approach and take some of this money away from our teachers because they're not able to put in more hours above the 30 hours we're already asking for them. And I think that we just need to think about what our teachers need to be able to be their best selves in the classroom to help our
Agreed.
kids be academically successful.
I agree
Thank you,
with
Ms.
that.
Seidman.
I agree with that.
Which I agree as well, which is one of the reasons that I'm not an advocate for the attendance piece, because I believe that we give our teachers days off and they should be able to utilize those days off without penalty. I understand that there's a team atmosphere and that sort of thing, which I believe we will discuss this more when it comes to the budget and potentially having some additional substitute options for that.
I
And
agree with that.
wasn't the conversation though that the 30, which I think it currently is now, the tiered approach would be down from there. So 30 would remain the highest level, and then there would be a tiered approach down from that. I don't know what the actual numbers would be, but so it wouldn't increase from 30. It would just be tiered down from there.
Well, President Moran had said if it was 20, it'd be this, 30s are like, here's where we're at. And if it's 40, it's more. And I just
okay.
don't
I'm
want
sorry.
to
I
see
missed
them
that.
having to try to push harder, because part of when we say this is how much our teachers get paid, this is part of that number. We include this as part of their, like when we're advertising how much our teachers made, when we had the people come in and explain our salary surveys and things like that, they were including all these different benefits. Am I correct? Like that was part of the overall package. So if they lose this money, they're not actually making that amount of money. And so we can't really say that's what we pay our staff.
I'm flexible on the hours. That was just
I don't know about
throwing
that.
out random number. I
Yes.
mean, so yeah, we can leave that to the committee to come up with, but I do think a tiered approach would convert this into a pay for performance award.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And Ms. Zeidema, can you confirm for me that from what it sounds like you've gone to meetings and stuff like that, that you confirm that Steve Watson's overall survey with student overload is applicable to LESD? Is that a correct assumption?
Well, I can't speak specifically to ours. I mean, they didn't do a specific thing for ours, but when I went to his town hall, it was very much that teachers are overloaded with a huge amount of things. And it's not just our district does it, our state does it. There's just more and more expectations on our teachers, and they only have so much time in a day to do all the things. So
Okay.
anytime we can take some things off their plates so they can be their best selves in the classroom, I am in support of that right now.
I agree with you on that. And I have to say, our teachers are so amazing. You guys have seen them in their classrooms and you would not know they're overloaded. They are in there, they're giving 150% every day. They're there all day long and they're bubbly and their teaching is, they're spectacular. But when they leave, they're wiped. And then they have all of these things going on outside too. And it is a lot. It is definitely a lot, but you don't see the impact in the classroom. I will say that, but I know from talking to them that they are feeling it.
Well, they really are overloaded. I mean, anybody that knows anybody who's married to a teacher or whatever, they're 100% overloaded. And I think that what Ms. Zeidema and Ms. Moran both say, that in terms of if they have a day off, they should take a day off. I mean, different people work different ways, and it's not how many hours the teacher puts in. It's the job they do and their mental state when they are here. And that's what we're looking at as a school district. We want to have well-balanced kids who are, learn and become intelligent or whatever. And I mean, a teacher could show up literally, I'm not saying here, but I mean, a college instructor could probably show up 15 minutes late and be every class and be the best teacher that every student ever had in that subject. And I think I think that we need to cherish our teachers and their individuality and stuff like that, and 100%. So I'm just affirming what I think that both of you have said.
I have a question. How much of the 301 monies are the teachers getting? They're getting pretty much all of it, right?
Wendy will have to give you those exact numbers. The one I have up now is from the M&O budget. I don't know if she has those handy.
So on average, we have about a half year of budget carry forward in each of those funds. So we were planning, not knowing what would happen with Proposition 301 when it expired. We tried to reserve some of those to help phase that out. So we do have about a half a year excess in each of those funds.
But it was extended.
It was extended, yes.
Yeah. So the thing is, if they don't achieve everything, have they ever not achieved all the money, the whole pot?
So they have not. We have been, over the last couple of years, we are starting to decrease the amount of that carryover. But we have not used all of the money in those funds.
So some teachers didn't get all of it, you're saying?
In performance pay, there were some that did not receive it, but not a large number.
Okay. The Prop 301, and most of you may remember or not, that was 2001, I believe it was voted on. And the intent was pretty specific. Get as much of this money into the hands of those teachers as you can. As much as you can, because it was a benefit for those teachers about the things we're asking them to do, the professional development, the things outside the classroom, the tutorial, as you mentioned, after school, things of that nature. And I would like to see personally get as much of that money into the hands of those teachers as you possibly can. And then is it tied to the sites or you don't, it's just a district pot?
So district level, except for the third pot, we do allocate 2 instructional assistants to each campus.
Okay. And also I'm glad to see that we're including out of M&O, albeit, those people who were deprived of this money. Yeah, your reading specialist, your ELL coordinator, your student advisor, for God's sake. What I don't see is your media specialists.
We don't have any,
You don't have any. I guess the reason. I don't
or you
see it-
would.
I wish you did.
We do too.
Behavior coaches, these people are absolutely instrumental in what we do for our kids on a daily basis.
Mhm.
I'm glad we're doing it. I'll commend the board for making sure that we're rewarding those teachers in the same fashion as we are our teachers. But my thought is, it's a tax. 301's a tax. I want as much of this money into the hands of those teachers as possible every year, like a bonus. And that's my thought.
And one thing I thought that Dr. Dowling brought up was that when, I think what I understood is that when they tied the student performance with the AZ merit, it meant they didn't get their check until later.
Yes.
And I think that is a fabulous idea for several reasons. First off, it just is sort of a mental subtle thing that is going to maybe make teachers want to renew, to stay another year, just because they're going to get the money when they're waiting for their first check the next year. It's just, it's not scientific, but it just sort of has a psychological effect of that. And I think it's really important, the AZ merit, because if teachers feel like this is exactly what I got to do, and they can affect their own pay, it's going to take away a lot of stress, because they're going to have a very clear objective of what they're doing. They're going to say, look, I can just focus on this, which is probably why they went into teaching anyway. And they're, any person, they just like to know what their job is, instead of it being a lot of mumbo jumbo. And I think that's exactly what we want, is we want teachers really focused on the students, and if the student achievement is just a measure, but if you have kids that are high achieving, all the other problems are going to take care of themselves. I mean, the discipline is going to go away. I mean, things, not exactly, it's not a switch, black and white, but you engage kids, they're going to be, you have to motivate them to engage them. And when you motivate them, they're going to pay attention, and you're not going to have a lot of other problems. So I highly recommend we tie that together.
I have to say, I respectfully disagree with the idea of linking this or any other pay specifically all to AZ merit or whatever the state test.
AASA.
Yeah, the new test, whatever it's called, because the idea is we want academic success and we want to see student achievement, but what academic success looks like for every student is not the same. And AZ merit is a single snapshot of that child. It does not show where they started or where they ended, which is what our benchmark tests do show. It shows where they were at the beginning, where they were at the middle, and where they ended at the end of the year. So I don't think that tying it just to the AZ merit thing is a good plan. I do think it's good to have that linked with the letter grades, which is what letter grades are based on. And that's a way to pull that into it. And I think that's good that we use that for our principal things like that. But I would not like to see us use a single snapshot for all our students to show what our academic success.
I agree with you. I think I misspoke and I overgeneralized. What I said, what I meant was it's tied to academic achievement. And if we use our assessments to show that there was great progress, yes, that to me that's my definition of academic achievement. So I'm sorry that I didn't mean just, here's the AZ merit score, here's your pay. It does, all that should be factored in.
Excellent. Thank you, board members. Thank you, Executive Director DeCoste. You have our feedback, and we look forward to hearing what the Career Development Committee comes up with going forward.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 3D, the aggregate spending limit, which will be presented by Ms. Wendy Balls.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning. So tonight I do have just a quick update for you on the aggregate expenditure limit. Just to go back a little bit and talk about the expenditure capital limit. It was created in 1980 when the school funding formula was created. Over the years, we have seen increased funding in school districts, but this percentage of the state budget has not been updated. Also in 2000, when the voters approved Proposition 301, those funds were outside of this calculation. In 2018, Senate bill was passed and signed by the governor, and that extended it by 20 years. However, it did not still leave it outside of this expenditure limit. So in the current year, those Proposition 301 or classroom site funds that were extended were included in this aggregate expenditure limit. That put school districts over the limit by $1.2 billion. For Litchfield, it was $11.8 million. So in order to not incur cuts in the current year, the House and the Senate had to approve by a 2/3 vote for school districts to exceed that limit or to override that limit. And it had to have been done by March 1st. So February 15th, the Arizona House did approve to override the limit. And on February 21st, the Senate also approved it. So in the current year, there is no required cuts. Any questions on that?
No, we are very grateful to the Arizona legislature for their generosity in letting us use our own funds. Next, are there any questions from any board members or any other comments? Then we will proceed on to the final discussion of the evening, which will be our budget planning discussion, also presented by Executive Director Qualls.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the governing board. Superintendent Gunning is going to accompany me and cover the first slide for you.
She was holding the mic, so I was going to let her keep going. Okay, so we wanted to start and kick off the budget timeline and just kind of going back over a couple of things that affect the budget. So on January 11th, you approved the contract language. February 8th, we approved the issuance of our certified contracts. We are now in the study session where we'll have the budget discussions. You have the interactive spreadsheet. It'll help us have some guidance as we then approach March 15th so that we can bring forth recommendations. During that time, you'll approve staffing numbers, class size, including our DLA, approval of insurance plans, work calendars, salary reduction plan, which is something you do annually. So I don't want anyone to panic on that component, and approve the overall projected budget. Then coming on April 12th, we'll bring back to you the fiscal year 23 placement charts, including classroom site fund amounts. And then May 10th, governing board will approve the issuance of the administrative contracts and classified work agreements.
Can I ask a question while we're on this first slide? So when we say on April 12th that we're going to approve the placement charts, does that include the changes that should be coming about from the compensation study that we did? And then how is that going to be included in the budget if we're approving that and discussing that after approving the projected budget?
So the placement charts are driven by those recommendations that you'll see. Some of those are in that budget discussion interactive spreadsheet, as well as any ones that we've already approved in, what was that, in January that we approved. So that then triggers the changes to the placement charts. So the placement charts is like an after effect from you approving those raises or increases for those positions. Then the other components were phase 2 and phase 3, which I think you were maybe possibly referring to as where we would band things together. That would be in future years. So right now we're just working on phase 1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have one question. The certified contracts went out and the amount of their contract was current year amount.
Correct. So then there'll be
I
a,
almost got run down at church in the parking lot by this teacher, I won't name her, in the school district, that said to me, how come I'm not getting a pay raise for next year? I said,
hold tight, hold tight.
hopefully there was language in there that says the amount in
Mhm.
there
Pending
is
board
current
approval.
amount and will be increased, hopefully increased.
Right.
Some verbiage in there.
Right.
Was
There
there
was.
not?
Yes,
I-
there was.
I
And there
tried
was,
to
a-
explain it to her and she
yeah.
didn't believe.
And we
me.
encouraged a lot of people to watch tonight too. So
Okay.
this is a good study session to watch
Good.
as well as the
You're
March
there.
15th. Absolutely. So then we'll send out additional communication once the
Yeah,
budget
I wish you
process
would,
is.
because I don't want to get run down.
Is complete.
I will
Well,
say, I got
being run down.
more comments about the blank contracts than anything else and not having, and why sending them out without the right amount or whatever. So everyone watching tonight, let's do it. And maybe let's think in the future about how we send those out, because there was a lot of confusion around why the amounts were
Well, it's
either not in there or incorrect. So
Right.
we'll
And
get it
it's
worked out.
brand new process for us. So, whenever you change a process, there's always confusion. But this is something that the majority of our surrounding districts do
Yeah, this.
every
is-
year. So it's
this
a
is nothing-
standard,
this is-
right?
this
It's
is-
not a new
yeah.
process. It's just new for us. So we know in the future, there should be fewer and fewer. But yes, the HR department sent out a very explicit memo, lining it all out.
And one question, the approved salary reduction plan.
Sure.
I'm
That's what you have to do every year so that you can have that it's just that caveat that the board has to approve every year so that we have that authority. If something were to happen,
Okay.
like the aggregate spending limit. not being
I
allowed.
freaked out the first time we had to do that too, when I was a board member, so I understand.
Yes.
Good.
That's why we always say it's a standard. It's just every year. It's annually that we do that.
I didn't think it was a big deal.
So I want to just take a quick minute and review our funding that's based on our student enrollment and student numbers. Several years ago, and since 1980, school districts had been funded always on prior year membership. That was changed, and some of the components are current year funded, but some of the others are still prior year funded. So it gets confusing as we start talking about budgets, which student counts are we using for each of the budgets? So the maintenance and operation budget is current year. Prior year enrollment is used to calculate the M&O override, the capital outlay and DAA fund, and also the classroom site fund and instructional improvement fund. So looking to next year, I projected the amount of budget funding we'll have. Again, the current year estimate for next year is $10,372. This year, we hired a demographer to come in and look at our new housing starts and our enrollment at each campus to give us a projection of what they thought the enrollment would do next year. So they anticipate that we'll have an additional 200 students. So I included that in the current year count for next year. I took our 100th day number of students enrolled and added $200. We have Group A weights. That's a state formula to give funding for speech students, learning disabled students, some basic weights, the A weights. It'll be around 1,600. And then Group B is our special education students. That's just over 2,000. So in total, our weighted student count, I anticipate will be just over 14,000. For the funding amount, I took the current year base support level and added 2%. And so $4,534.44 per student. So the base level amount will be $63,600,000. So in calculating the M&O override using the prior year, so that would be our current year 100th day numbers, including the weights at 13,446 times the $44,534 per student. We add in our transportation and audit fee that we get to also include in our budget and take 15% of that. So the override comes out to $9,566,000. So you add together the base support level amount the override, the audit reimbursement for about 36,000, transportation funding of 2.7 million, and carry forward of 8 million. We transfer out 50,000 to capital for our K-3 reading program. And then we transfer funding to an energy and water fund to pay our lease payment on some of the energy management systems. So the projected budget for next year is $83.8 million.
Wendy, I have a question on the M&O override. You note here, as we just talked about, it's prior year student count. And then when you list funding per student, I noticed that you list the current year amount. So we get paid for the students last year in the current year funding amount?
Yes. So in this calculation, it's the prior year student count, but current year funding amount.
Okay. It's a little confusing, right?
It is.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Well, you're just doing out of necessity because you don't have a crystal ball. Is that correct? In terms of the student count?
So school districts were prior year, and that was at the state level in the funding formula. And then it was changed to current year, which does make it a little more challenging to project your overall M&O budget. But in that change, when they made the change, it was for the M&O base support level. They didn't address overrides. So therefore, it defaults back to prior year, but it's still at the current year funding amount.
Thank you.
So the next step is to look at our projected expenditures for 22-23. So what's going to change from this year to next year? I had estimated a 10% health insurance premium. That's 3% now. So we know there will be a little bit less increase there. So that was a really good news this evening. Performance award advancements. This takes into account the teachers that are on level 1, 2A, 2B, and then moving up one step next year. So that's the additional cost just for the moving up of those employees. A 2% performance pay at just over $1 million. And that is what was recommended in the salary compensation study, was a 2% increase. Casualty and property insurance. Our premium is based on our student count. So I'm assuming our student count went up, so our premium probably will go up a little bit too. The retirement contribution rate is actually going down for the first time in many years, slightly going down. So the employer portion and the employee portion will be going down next year for retirement. We have a few more adjustments based on our salary study to the placement charts, which will be just under 40,000. And then staffing changes, we'll go through additional information on this, but staffing changes of around 3.5 million. Utility costs of 103,000. So there's always an increase somewhere, whether it's APS or our water companies. And then I take into consideration, we had several vacant positions this year. And if we fill all of those next year, we need to be able to make sure we reserve funding to fund those before we add on all the new positions or move people into M&O. So the $1 million is to account for those that were not filled this year. And that does take in consideration the ones that were filled by vendors. So I took the amount of the open positions and subtracted out what we paid vendors and came up to the $1 million.
So in essence, you're saying it's going to be about just over $4 million, $4.4 million in staffing changes between the two buckets, between what we have now and what we will have next year for the vacant positions we need to fill, plus the additional positions that we will potentially hire.
Yes.
Okay. One other question. You said performance pay of 2%. Is it performance pay or is it a salary increase to the base?
So it would be a performance pay for certified administrators, because in their contract, they receive performance pay. So for them, it is an addition to their contract. And then in the 23, 24 year, it will go into their base. So it will roll into their base the following year. For classified hourly employees, it is added into their hourly rate.
Okay. And so how is that? I'm sorry, go back to the certified. How is that paid to them?
So first year, it's paid as a stipend, so it's a separate
Okay.
line on their paycheck. For 22, 23, it'll be a separate line because the
Just-
contracts have been issued. So
Just
this
one time per year?
It would be one-time stipend for 22, 23. And then in
Mhm.
23, 24, it rolls into the base contract amount that would be in their actual contract.
Okay, so if we're going to give them an increase next year, right? Not the school, not 20, what are we talking about? 22, 23. In the next school year, 23, 24, because it's not in their base, their increase for the following year, will it include that performance pay or no? Because we give them an increase to the base, we wouldn't give them an increase to the performance pay. So will that stipend count in their base the following year when they get a performance pay, whatever we're calling it at that point in time? Does that make sense?
Yes, it
Okay.
does. So the increase for certified and administrators is not based on their own personal contract. It's an average of that group. So if you look at teachers in total, I average what the average pay is, and I include the base contract and the performance pay increase from the previous year. So it is considered in the average that.
You do
next
include it when
increase-
you're doing that. Okay, that's just
Yes.
what I wanted to make sure. Typically
Yes.
you would, if it's a stipend or separate, you wouldn't include that. I just want to make sure that we're accumulating that over the year, so they're getting credit for that. Okay.
And I also include in that calculation if there was graduation credits that is then going to roll into someone's base. So I take the items that are going to roll into the base to calculate what that average is.
For the future. Okay, thank you.
All right, so in total, the projected expenditures are 79,700,000. So to go over some of the salary study additional placement chart adjustments, we have department assistants. Some of them are referred to an admin assistant, some are secretary, some are assistant. So this goes back to where we were talking about the bands. So the second year of the plan to start to work on banding these. But all of those positions to go from 1481 to 15, so an increase of 19 cents. The superintendent secretary to increase by $3. The food service courier to increase to $15, which is consistent with our warehouse courier. And so that would be $1.79 an hour. And then security guard to bump that additional 35 cents.
And on that right there. 13.15. I can drive all over town and there's jobs that are nothing less than $15 an hour. Why are we paying somebody $13.15?
So we've adjusted for minimum wage. And then based on our compensation study is what we've increased on. We have,
Why are we paying somebody less than $15 an hour? We got $15 for everybody else. Is there anybody who's making less than $15 an hour besides a security guard?
yes. So all of our instructional assistants, all our aides are less than $15.
What would it
And
cost
our
us?
maintenance-
What would it cost us to put everyone, have a minimum wage of $15 an hour in
So
this district?
I would need to calculate that.
I would like to see that because we would be, I think we're remiss in not paying what people can get at at warehouses, at Walmart warehouse or Amazon. They're paying anywhere from $21 to $26 an hour. Target, it just announced they're going to pay some people based on their skills, $24 an hour starting immediately. We got to look at the cost and to see what it would take to put everybody at least 15. Now, the issue we're going to have is the person who spent 5 years getting to 15, then we have to take that into consideration. And based on how many years they've been with us, I think we're going to have to adjust their pay too. But that's going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly part of it. But I would hate to see anybody making less than $15 an hour in this day and age.
I totally agree with you, Dr. Dowling. I also think we need to tell the state legislature to give us more funding for education so that we have the money to do it.
Well, I would just like to add to that, that I agree with you, Dr. Dowling, because a lot of our instructional aid positions have remained unfilled. And although money is not the cure, as we have found with our transportation department, to those ails, I think it would help in that area. And I think I would be proud to say that our district has a minimum wage, a self-inflicted, if you will, minimum wage of $15 an hour.
So I'm not clear. What you're saying, do you agree?
Yes, I'm saying I agree that I would be proud to say that our district has a minimum wage of $15 an hour, even though the state has a separate minimum wage.
Absolutely. That's
Yes,
irrelevant.
I
By
agree.
all intents and purposes, right now in this country, it's $15 an hour. Yeah, unsaid or unspoken or unmandated in most cases, unless you go to Flagstaff, I don't think it's $18 an hour, but anyway.
And I agree, there is a trickle down effect to that. And we would need to look at the entire effect of that. And I have some ideas on how that can be funded as we get further in this discussion.
Absolutely.
How many security guards are there, just to roughly?
So currently we don't have any, but
Oh.
we were just planning if we do have any, we wanted to update their chart.
Okay.
We don't have any at the middle schools?
No.
So right now it's
Okay.
free. We could pay them $100 an hour.
Yeah. Middle schools, maybe 200, who knows? You'd be brave enough to go there. I didn't say that.
It's clearly getting late. We're getting a little giggly up here. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. So the next item is for certified teachers to increase the doctorate level by $1,000. That also came from the compensation study. The exempt employees, we were not able to increase mid-year, so that's why there's several of them listed here. The Director of Student Information to increase by $2,704. Transportation Supervisor by $1,000. Custodial Supervisor, $3,388. Food Service, $1,950. Grounds Supervisor, $3,338. The Mechanic Supervisor, $1,056. And the Warehouse Supervisor, $2,514. And Office Supervisors, $552. So again, that brings them to the mean of the districts that we were comparing to. Okay. So looking at staffing changes, if we think back a year ago, our enrollment went down 960 students. So we were really looking at a reduction in force, but fortunately ESSER II was there. And so we said, we're going to retain the people we have using ESSER II. Well, ESSER II, we've pretty much diminished that pot, and now we need to start moving those teachers and employees back into our M&O funds or other funds. And we had created new staffing ratios to do that. And looking at that now and what we've been through, we know some of those positions, we definitely cannot use that lower staffing ratio. So assistant principals, to put the middle schools back to an assistant principal at every campus, not a half at the smaller campuses, to put it back to one for every single campus. And currently at our K-8 schools, we don't have assistant principals. So if the school has more than 900 students in the K-8, the recommendation is to add an assistant principal. And that would also apply to elementary, just at this time, we don't have an elementary with more than 900 students. Student advisors, we had reduced student advisors to less than 2 per campus. So the recommendation is to not only move the ones from ESSER II, but also add to that and increase it to 2 student advisors at every middle school campus. And to add 1 more, so there would be 3 if there were over 900 students. So that's 1 per grade level if there's over 900. Behavior coaches. I anticipate there being enough in ESSER II for next year to pay the behavior coaches and instructional coaches that were currently being paid from ESSER II. We do have a behavior coach that was currently being paid from results-based funding. That school no longer receives results-based funding, so to shift that over to the ESSER 2, and then to add a behavior coach at White Tanks Learning Center. Instructional coaches at the middle school, again, actually at the K-8s, if there's more than 750 students, to add a 0.5. When we set up the K-8s, the idea was every campus has an instructional coach. And so we maintained that for K-8. And I had a long discussion with Meredith Noche. And she said, but when do you have to understand we're doing PLCs for 9 grade levels. We're doing testing for 6 grade levels, and you're doing all the additional work. And that's more than any other school. So we really need more help. So that's why you see a 0.5 that would be shared between the 2 K-8s. For the school this year that reached over 900, we did have an instructional assistant in lieu of a student advisor, but now that we're adding back a student advisor at 900, that position would be closed. Any other questions on those before I go?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The student advisor piece, excuse me, I'm sorry. The assistant principal piece at the K-8 campuses, do both of our K-8 campuses have over 900 students?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure where the 900 number came from. And I mean, I'm sure that it's fine, but I think that K-8 should have assistant principals if they have 800 students. I just think that that's a lot of grades. It's a lot of students. And I understand in the past, we haven't been able to do that, but I think it's important. And I just want to make sure that 900 number isn't going to now or in the future going to knock someone out, because I think that that's really important. Same thing with instructional coaches. I think the 0.5 between the two of them is a little wonky. Like, I think there's 2 schools, right? I mean, if you have an elementary school, you have a K-5, you have an instructional coach. At a middle school, you would have an instructional coach. They're doing different things. They're doing different grades. Just because they're all on one campus doesn't mean that one person should have to do that. So I would be in favor of saying if you're a K-8, then you would get 2 instructional coaches, one for K through 5 and one through 6 through 8. I think the 0.5 having to go between 2 campuses is a lot for one person. Again, I know I'm magically having money that is not appearing, but I'd like to see if that's a possibility, because I think those campuses are always the largest and, you know, have the most grades. And I think that if we could make that happen, going back to full-time, you know, student advisors and assistant principal and instructional coach, or actually fully staffing the schools as they should have been, if we can afford to do that, I think that would be a good change. That's my only question. That actually wasn't a question. That was a statement. Sorry, Wendy.
That's okay. All right. So out of ESSER 2, we funded a psychologist. We actually would have hired an intern, but there were no interns available at the time. So we changed that to a psychologist position. So the recommendation is to change from a psychologist to an intern, and that be paid from the maintenance and operation fund. So looking at instructional positions, again, when we were looking at the budget last year, I was using our normal target class sizes that are in board policy, and we had excess teachers and we wanted to retain them rather than doing a reduction in force. So this is just moving 4 middle school teachers to M&O, which are now needed based on the increase in students. The elementary level teachers moving 11 out of ESSER, 2 out of results-based, and then 12 into M&O. I know that doesn't add up, but district-wide, right now I'm predicting 1 less teacher in the elementary campus. And as you know, I monitor that as enrollment changes in the current year, and also next year, as we know, if someone's not returning, and as we go through open enrollment. So that is a constant moving number. So don't hold me to that. We know it's most likely going to go up. Middle school special areas. We have 1 smaller middle school that has been having 5 specials, where our other middle schools have 5.5. That was not part of our reductions. It's just over the years, they staffed with 5. So I did ask to go up to 5.5, so it would be consistent with our other middle schools. Reading specialists, 1.6 is currently being funded out of ESSER 2. The 0.6 is because that was a person that we knew was going to be retiring, and we wanted to get their experience for an extra portion that we could. So we got the 0.6. So 1.5 will switch to maintenance and operation budget. Special education teachers. Again, I know it doesn't add up. I have 2 self-contained and 2 additional ones for middle schools. So our smaller middle school currently have 2 resource teachers instead of 1 per grade level. And that causes scheduling issues for them. And so they've asked that we have 3 resource teachers at every middle school. So 1 per grade level. And we would be closing 1 self-contained program that is our online program. That's why it nets to 3 instead of 4.
I have a question. These special ed teachers are going to be paid out of M&O?
That's currently, yes. So you'll see as we get to the end, the amount that we are over budget, several positions will need to go to other funds.
Okay.
But the plan is to show you everything, and then it would get recoded if we need to later.
And Superintendent, I still haven't gotten that information I wanted about the breakout on the SPED teachers, or anybody who teaches or it touches SPED students. Okay. Did you get it? Sorry, yeah,
The Friday update was the list of funds. I don't think that had anything, list of all the special ed funds and what their current balances were. But I don't, you're saying you wanted the number of teachers and students.
Exactly. I wanted to know.
Yeah, I think that's in the
We
special
talked
ed
about that.
report.
I
Yeah.
don't think there's a misunderstanding about what I needed.
So there was a report probably in your Friday update, but it had the number of positions and what funds they were paid for and the cost for it. So it would list out resource teacher, X number of teachers, this is the dollar amount, instructional assistants, here's the number, here's the dollar amount.
Yeah,
By fund,
by fund.
yes.
That's probably not a good way to send to me. Yeah. Sometimes I missed the little box down in there on the weekly report. I'm still getting used to that. And then the other question is, you've got 2 FTE self-contained and 2, all of these self-contained, well, there's 2 self-contained and 2 full-time teachers, employees. This is all middle school, right? For the special ed?
So the 2 resource teachers are middle school. Self-contained, I believe, are both elementary. The self-contained are elementary
Okay.
level. Any other questions?
I have a question on, I don't know that you touched on this piece yet, but the ELL coordinator positions, we're basically moving those from ESSER 2 funds into M&O. Does it make sense to have 1 full-time employee per school, or do we have varying populations of ELL students that might require more at one school versus less at another?
That's a very good question. It's because they were 0.5 previously. The state requirements for ELL changed, and Mrs. Larson was nice enough to send me a really nice email to remind me with the state requirements, they now have to spend 60 minutes per grade level with elementary students, and it has to be per grade level. So you can't group a bunch of groups together, like a 3 grade span, and try to fit that in. So in order to meet the state requirements and the number of minutes required for these students, we really need 1 ELL employee per campus.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But hold on, I'm sorry, just a second, Kim, but to your point, you might have to have a minimum of 1, but you were saying there might be a requirement that we need 2. at a campus. Not that you would have less than one, but that you would have more than one if the student population required that. Is that what you were asking?
Well, I was thinking we might need less than one at a
Oh,
campus
okay, I
because some of
misunderstood.
our
Okay.
campuses don't have a very high ELL population. And I would hate to have one school really overstaffed and
Yeah.
another understaffed if we're just doing it blanket across the board. But if the state has issued another unfunded mandate to have one basically per school that we have to have, then that's going to be the minimum. And if we could pull some money from somewhere to optimize that. But I believe the one per school is better than what we've had historically. So that is an
Yes.
improvement.
It is.
Yeah.
And also those schools that do have, I'm not sure the amount that it's over. Do you know the amount that it's over? Somewhere around 40 students or more, we do add an instructional assistant in the room to help them.
I have a comment that, and it's probably has nothing to do with this today, but I think I'm curious if we could have a discussion at some point of where, how ELL students are progressing to being non-ELL students, you know, how that's going and all that. So I hope that, is that something coming up or is that?
So once our Azella testing is completed, then we can provide you that information.
When what testing?
Azella, the testing they take is called Azella.
I see.
So once that's completed, then we'll be able to give you updates on.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because I mean, just historically even, and you know, what's going on and how long it's taking and all that stuff. Because I don't have a clue. I don't understand how long. I've talked with Jen Larson. She said, I mean, we've had some kids are in it for 5 years, you know, some or whatever. I know that the legislature, when they passed it and really enforced immersion in the teaching, that the expectation was it would be a year, I believe. So that's, you know, and you know, we know reality is different than whatever, but that seems to me something that's really crucial because it's our ELL thing is almost more in some regards more important because it's dragging down our academic scores. And I mean, that's not, if you don't understand the language, how are you going to do well in school? So I'd say what? Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. And, you know, and that's all, you know, that's all fine. I just wonder if there's things we can talk about that we can figure out ways to amp that up because that'll
Yes.
make a drastic change in our district. It really will. It's a
Thank you, Board Member Honak. I would like to officially add that to our board member requested agenda items for a study session to have a presentation on our ELL program. I think that would be helpful for Board Member Honak and Dr. Dowling to increase their knowledge of that program.
Okay.
Ms.
Thank you.
Qualls.
Thank you, President Moran. So also on here, there's some positions that were funded for ESSER for instructional aides that were only for that year. So those positions will go away unless we determine that they are needed again, and then they will be added back. But at this point, they were for 1 year only. And then for 7-hour aides, which will be in those self-contained rooms that were on the line above. So 2 instructional assistants for each of those programs. When we look at the district level, you have the Deputy Superintendent of Academic Success. We have 3 positions related to supporting the one-to-one device program, a computer project manager, a computer repair technician, and also a tech 2. We've also talked about a position to support finance and the executive director of finance next year. We have not approved any different job descriptions, so we just have a to be determined there, and also some support for our communications department. And again, we still need to present a job description for that, but I wanted to put in just a budget holder place for those positions. So in summary, about $83.8 million expected budget. Our expenditures, 79.7 million minus our adjustment for health insurance. So approximately $4 million left at the end in our budget. My recommendation is to maintain around an $8 million or a 10% budget balance in maintenance and operations. And that is just kind of a buffer if enrollment goes down again, if the override doesn't pass, it just gives a little bit of a buffer into the maintenance and operation amount. So about $3.9 million would need to come from other funds. So when we look at the beginning of next year, I anticipate about 15.8 million in those other funds. About 2 million of that is in the fund that we have set aside for opening a new school. But that's included in that 15.8 million. If we were to use approximately 4 million of it, we would have 11.8 million left in those funds.
I have one comment on that. When Board Member Clymer and I attended the ASBA training, we attended a session on the budget, and I cannot find my notes on that. But our carry forward and our rainy day funds are significantly higher than what ASBA recommends. Do you happen to remember what those percentages are? Board Member Clymer, do you recall that at all?
No, I absolutely recall the conversation. In terms of the percentage, I don't recall that. I'm sure I can find it. I agree with you wholeheartedly that ours is significantly higher, not only than what they recommend, than what other people are able to do. I know that's out of a lot of hard work and perseverance on our part, but I do sort of share the idea that $8 million budget carry forward seems high. And I know you're going to convince me otherwise, because that's what you do every year. But with having to find $4 million someplace else, it seems like maybe there should be some wiggle room in that amount so that we don't have to take from something else. But anxious to hear the rest of the conversation.
And what I would add to that as our history is when I look back at the 2018-2019 budget, we had a carry forward of 4.1 million, which was less than 6% of our overall budget balance that year.
And it has increased the last couple years with COVID and the savings or changes that have happened. One thing to keep in mind is of our approximately $40 million of state aid, we don't receive 13 million of it until July of the following year. So if we don't have the available balance, we would have to register warrants. Our credit line is only $5 million. So we're trying to cover $13 million of our budget through July 1st of the next year until legislature would reduce that rollover.
Understood. When back in 2018-19, when we had 4.1 million of carry forward, did we have to use warrants or use any of that process?
We have not. So far, we have not.
Okay, thank you.
But that's just something to consider in
I've
there.
got a question on that. I think the 8 million is nice. It's more than I think we need. Usually, 4 or 5%, which puts you in a 4 or 5, about $4 million range is what you had talked about. And that was in the old school was about 4%. Also, where does the indirect cost monies come in here?
So the indirect cost money is part of that estimated other funds. So it's part of that 15.8.
Yeah, part of the 50. Yeah,
Yep.
that's the 6
Right.
and the yeah, okay. Yeah.
And that's what I'm just trying to balance is let's start using some of that rainy day money up rather than just adjusting down our M&O carryover. So let's start using some of those funds.
I'm all for using
And-
that for pay raises, hiring people. The indirect cost monies I thought was awfully high. I think we've got money. I just, as we move forward, we have to consider at some point whether the district wants to go back out for an M&O override too. So in the back of my mind, it always sticks in there. That just
And just consider this the other funds have been building for years and years and years. So currently they're only growing by about 200,000 because I have been moving expenditures into those funds. So if you use 3 or 4 million of it, you're not going to gain that back. So once you use it, it's gone. So you just have to have a plan in a couple of years of how you're going to fund that. Proposition 208 would have been great at this point to help us with that, but at this point, I'm not
Yeah.
counting on that.
Yes, I agree. I'm all in favor of using what we generally call the rainy day funds or the additional funds available. However, if we get to the point where we feel like that we're using too much of that, I would be open to reducing the carry forward number as well, but we can
Yes.
continue the discussion.
Just trying to balance those two, and that's where your guidance is to help determine the budget. And then over the year, I kind of look at, do we take some more out of the rainy day or those other funds, or do we do the M&O carryover? So just other things to keep in mind, the governor's budget is the 2% inflation. Currently, there is no other funding in his budget for school districts. It's just the 2% is what they're considering the inflation amount. Proposition 208 is being litigated. I doubt that we will see any of 208, but that's yet to be determined. As Dr. Dowling mentioned, the override, if it is not passed this fall, then we would need to reduce the budget, the override amount by 33.3%. So a little over $3 million decrease if the voters don't approve an election in November for override. And then again, the expenditure limit, we will definitely hit that again unless something can be either on the ballot for voters to vote on to change that limit, or again, in February, we'll be waiting for the legislatures to override that amount again. So just to keep in mind, we need to do something to change that going forward in the formula. It needs to get fixed.
Just as a side note, I did find my notes from my ASBA School Finance 101 Budget Basics, and they recommend that your rainy day or reserve limit be 5 to 10% maximum of your budget. And we have currently 19.3%. So agree wholeheartedly to spend that down over time.
Okay. So with the discussion so far, I have a note that you want to look at increasing to $15 for every position. So there is no position less than 15. Okay, so that amount I will need to calculate that information. President Clymer, you had brought up earlier that the student transporters had asked to have dental coverage. So I don't know if that's something we want to consider also. I have that in the spreadsheet. The cost for that would be $394 per employee. And there are 54 currently planned for next year for student transporters. President Moran, if you can calculate that, please. My spreadsheet's on my other computer.
Let me get to the spreadsheet, sorry.
Okay.
For some reason, it's not coming up on.
Kim,
mine.
calculate something? It's already
I
happening.
have my
It's already done.
calculator right
It's already
I
done.
here.
should have our calculator right handy.
Okay, tell me those numbers again, Wendy, sorry. 360.
$394.32. And there's right now projected to be 54 student transporters next year.
That's $21,293.28.
Oh, yeah, you already have that in the spreadsheet.
So that is one of the items that we could plug into the spreadsheet. So is that something I guess you'd like to consider?
I mean, I think it's information that, yeah, I mean, I'd like to know that. I can't give you the answer right now about whether
Okay.
that, I mean, how that fits in, but I do think it should be at least part of the calculation and see
Okay.
what's there. And I see it here in the spreadsheet already, the 21,000. I'd also like to know, as I mentioned before, I'd also like to know the cost of adding the instructional coach, the one full-time person at each campus instead of a half person. So it'd be a half of a person, I guess. I don't know. Instead of 0.5 going to one full person.
No, I can- that could. All right, so let me switch computers.
That's absolutely something that you can send at a later time. I don't expect you to have that off the top of your head. So you can just send that
That's
to
okay.
us if you want to, or we can update it in this spreadsheet later.
While Wendy is doing that, I would like to ask a general question to the board members. During this budget planning process, the administrators provide us with a limited number of options for not what we can change, but what we have already discussed changing or adding. Tonight, obviously, Dr. Dowling has brought up the minimum wage of the district to $15 an hour. Board member Clymer has brought up the instructional coaches. Is that the position? But I'm curious to know what other areas you would like to see impacted on this budget. Not only the percentage increase, that always seems to be the biggest thing that we're concerned with. However, we know that we need a solution or multiple solutions to teacher burnout and to teacher retention, and money isn't the only solution to that. So what are your ideas for helping with that could be solved through these additional budget monies that we would like to spend? Board Member Honak?
I think you just answered your question. I think that we discussed it before. I don't think it's really a budgetary concern. It's really figuring out how that money's allocated. And I think that.
Yeah, so I'm asking if you have any specific ideas for that.
Well, I think that we all actually agree, how that more money towards academic for the performance pay type, for instance, for multiple reasons, because it is going to take the workload down for teachers. It's going to give them, I think, more of a focus of what exactly, they really just sort of simplify their job. But I don't think, I think overall we can do that working within the parameters that we have. I mean, we could just say throw more money at everything, but then it's going to come out to, reality, and I think,
Okay, do
Ms.
any
Qualls
other,
has done a good job of making a realistic budget, so.
okay, do any other board members have specific ideas or suggestions they'd like to see included in the potential budget to help solve the specific problem of teacher burnout and teacher retention?
I know that I saw in the timeline on the first slide of the next agenda items that we'll be talking about class sizes in the next board meeting. So this might be preemptive to that, but I do think that, and I know that the administration time and time again has shown us, all of the research and everything, that there's not a significant difference in academic success, whether you have 27 or 29 students in a classroom. Absolutely. I think it does impact teacher, emotional and mental state and the amount of workload that they have to do and that kind of thing. So I do think it should be part of the conversation. I know that absolutely impacts our bottom line because that's the most important, most expensive budget item. But I do think it should be at least part of the conversation. It seems like with all of the staffing changes and the additional positions and filling all of the vacant positions from this year going into next year, some of that might self-correct, but I absolutely think that we should at least have the conversation about what even small changes we can make there to help not only teachers, but also specialists and psychologists and all of these people that may not have direct teaching actual students, but might have caseloads in other areas.
And as to specifics with what I was talking about, because I didn't really give any specifics, is the specifics is really the performance pay, how that's all structured. So I don't know if that's another where we do that or where we're going to get to that point. Yes, it affects the budget, but I don't think we have to really look at it from the terms of the budget. I think if we know there's so much budgeted for performance pay, where do we get to the point we have a discussion and decide to adjust the performance pay to reflect, to address teacher burnout in academics? And I don't think we have huge disagreements, but I don't think it's within, I don't know how we.
I think that goes into the career performance committee. I don't know, I forget the exact verbiage of it, but that executive director DeCoste discussed earlier, that's up to that committee because the performance pay piece has to be agreed upon by a certain percentage of the teachers. So again, it is our job to fund that from a budgetary perspective, and we can give some feedback onto those specific parameters, which we have done tonight. And then Executive Director DeCoste and her committee will take it from there, from the specifics behind the performance pay piece.
And which I can understand, unless we decide to divide it into two. We could do that if we wanted to do it budgetary. We could just say, well, for performance pay, 70% is going to go to academic related stuff and 30% towards. We have the power here with our budget to say, well, we can give performance pay for tutoring and for certain types of things, but not for just other general stuff. So I don't know how we get to the point, but it affects both. But just say, here's the money and leave it to some committee that does. It isn't necessarily.
That's the feedback that we gave earlier. So I think, are you saying that you want us to have an additional different type of performance pay other than what we talked about earlier tonight and discussed, or I'm not quite clear on?
Well, I think it's just not, it isn't clear to me that exactly how it works. To me, I look at the performance things and they seem to be very just sort of general and vague, and maybe because I don't understand them, but I don't think so. I think that the professional development is kind of a broad encompassing thing. And it can mean, as we discussed a lot of different things tonight, it can just be, make work hours, keeping teachers in the classroom when they should have the day off, stuff like that. It shouldn't be that way. It should be for very clear, specific things. And so I don't know whether you guys have been on the board. I don't know how we arrive at that, but just leave it to a committee out there. I'm not sure that not that the committee isn't good and doesn't have good intentions, but our job is to give, direction and
Can I
so-
speak to that for a minute? You said you don't know how the committee decides that. Director DeCoste, maybe you could address how, like this with 301 monies, how there's rules about how that money has to be decided, how it's spent, and it has to do with our staff has to agree to what that is. And so that's part of the rules of using that money, correct?
Yes, for that particular fund. And what Ms. Qualls is talking about is so much larger than the small budget that this committee is dealing with.
Right.
It's a set amount that's allocated. So if we make any changes, then we have to go back to all of the anyone who's eligible for career ladder, which usually is about between 500 and 600 of our certified staff. And then they have to approve by 70% approval. And that's of people eligible, not of people who actually take the survey and vote for what we're doing or what changes the committee's recommending. So I think that's what they're saying is, but what I hear you saying maybe is that we have that split $4,000, $2,000, $2,000. Maybe you think 1,000 should go to professional contributions and 3,000 should be weighing in on student achievement. And then we tier that 3,000 instead of 2,000. Is that what I hear you saying?
I think that's part of, I do. I think that's part of it. I mean, because certainly that's within our purview as a board. But I'm also thinking about the person who gave the presentation about, that we've incorporated a lot of different ways our pay is going to be structured. And I agree with pretty much the whole premise of that, because people coming to LESD, he was telling us it was very hard for them to figure out even what they're going to get paid. And that's a symptom of a bigger problem that it is just very, there's not clarity, and I don't feel, I mean, we're looking at teacher assessments, which we have done. We've spent a lot of time on them, and it isn't even clear, I don't think, to a lot of us, at least in terms of how they affect metrics that count, such as student achievement and teacher
student
satisfaction and
achievement-
all that stuff. It's a lot of,
Yeah.
it's vague. And so if a committee has to come up with that, then maybe we do need to sit and say, well, we're only going to fund so much for that. And we're going to fund, more money to what we as a board and the community thinks are important things that are going to do. We know we have a problem because we got teacher burnout. I mean, that's shocking, that report. It's shocking,
It is.
I mean, we were on this earth to be happy, life doesn't turn out that way, but we shouldn't be institutionalized misery for teachers, which is.
Well,
what
the
that
301
service-
funds that Director DeCoste is referring to cannot be used for other, they're very specific and have to be used for that. What we're talking about tonight from a budgetary standpoint is the M&O budget. So they're really the 301 funds and M&O are really two separate buckets or two separate funds. And so I think that those are really two different conversations. We can't take the 301 monies and use them for other things like paying for dental and things like that.
No, I'm
That's
not talking about that. I'm
We
talking
have
about
more
what they
availability with M&O
suggested
funds.
is we separate out an academic pool versus a professional development pool and allocate the amount of money. I think I heard that correctly, and that's within our
Yeah.
purview to do here.
Yes, and I believe we already have that, but currently it's a 2,000 split. We do have performance pay based on professional development and performance pay based on student growth.
Okay, well, I guess maybe I propose that we change that ratio.
President
Go
Moran,
ahead.
can I just say one more thing about the
Yes.
teacher evaluation? Because I do want to clarify that in the evaluation system, it's kind of counted twice for, they're counted twice for student achievement. So in the actual eval, 33% of the evaluation score is based on their student achievement, their growth. So if you're 0.95 coefficient, which is about a year's growth or more, you get the highest points, and then it goes down from there. It's like 0.80 to 0.84 and then 0.7. So the growth coefficients, so those are in their actual eval, and it's 33% of their evaluation. And then on top of that, the 301 money is also, again, focused on student achievement. So that's twice in that same similar process that we're really focusing on student achievement and student growth.
Well, we had the expert come in and he said very, very clearly that there's not a lot of clarity. And we were talking about, for somebody to figure out what they're going to get paid, there's so many variables. And we talked about the fact that, okay, well, maybe we could give them a simplified sheet and it's got, 12 different asterisks that in fine print that qualify it, but at least they could see some basic things. But I think that's the problem is if you have overlapping your different performance things, the teacher development and the academic, but they all sort of have the same things repeated in them, it's not clear.
But I think we're talking about two
You're not
different.
going to get clear incentives if people don't have clarity of what they're.
I think we're talking about two different things. So when the compensation study was done, he was referring to what we publicize on our website as average teacher salary and what's in the placement charts. So we have to add certain things to that to come up with total compensation. I think the teachers are very clear on what the criteria is for this performance pay. You have to get a certain amount on your evaluation. You have to do a certain number of contribution hours. You have to have a certain growth coefficient. I think that's very clear to them. I think what the real underlying issue is that the evaluation tool that we use is not effective. And that's what we already talked about. We're going to look at that next year. So I think that will be embedded in that because right now, again, to just revisit what we talked about earlier, you have to get a score of 47% to get the full amount. So I think we need to change the evaluation tool, and that will create a more effective performance pay program when we change the way we're evaluating the teachers.
Well, I kind of agree with that, except for that what we're doing is you're saying we're deciding the budget of what it's going to be, but we haven't really decided what it is. So
Well, we aren't deciding the budget because 301 monies are totally separate than this. So again, I think that's a discussion for another time as far as talking about that particular piece of performance pay. We had a lengthy discussion on that earlier this evening, and that is not included in this M&O discussion that we're talking about this evening.
I understand, but when
Okay.
you say next year, why not next month or next week instead of next year? Because we have two severe problems: teacher burnout, and we have the academics. So
Well, we can't, I mean, we're in the middle of the year and some teachers have already been observed and begun that evaluation process. And so in order to, we would do it for the next school year, but if we did it next week or next month, we would have some people evaluated in a different way. So it would take time to
well,
go
I'm
through
not
that
saying
cycle.
we change it. I mean, you can't change it if there's they've been hired on a contract, but I don't think it sounds like we're just kicking it down the road. You know what I mean? That's all. I mean, we know the problems there, and
We are kicking it down the road because we have a limited amount of staff who can do a limited amount of things. And we have a lot of systems that need improved upon and implemented, such as our data system, such as one-to-one devices. So we have many things that need fixed, and we cannot fix them all at once. We don't have the resources to do that. So yes, my understanding is we are going to try to simplify the evaluation for next school year. And then during next school year, we will revamp the evaluation top to bottom to make sure that we have an effective evaluation process. But it's not fair to our teachers to change in the middle of the game.
we're not saying to change it right now. It's just
Okay.
like, it's just like not, academics is always kicked down the road.
No, it's not. It's the evaluation that's being kicked down the
Well,
road. It's not academics.
it's not improving, and it's getting worse.
Okay, let's
and
get back to the agenda item at hand, which is the M&O budget discussion for fiscal year 2023. Ms. Qualls?
So President Moran, you were asking about any other items to be added. So again, I have the $15 minimum, and as we look at placement charts, we can bring back the cost estimates for that. We have the estimate for adding dental insurance, and then I have one for looking at class size changes. Is there anything else?
Yes, I have one more. I'm beating a dead horse. Can we move every position that is special needs positions out of M&O?
Not everyone, no.
Okay, give me, at some point in time, I'd like to see how many we can move into the, out of M&O. And
Into
it-
grants. Into the IDA preschool and the IDA grant.
Yeah, out of that and the weights.
So the weights are in M&O. That
They're in
funding is
They're in
M&O.
M&O, but can you make it specific for, I don't know, you're going to have to help me with this. Is there ways to look at the weights? I know they're M&O, but they're saying they're specific to pay the sped positions. Is there any way that can be done?
Are you ultimately looking for, we have X number of special ed students, we get X number of dollars of funding specifically for them,
Right.
and we pay X number of dollars over that amount, like which we can't afford out of those funds.
Can
So
we put everybody?
every single person into that, yeah.
Their idea or.
So
or
our
grant.
IDEA funding is generally only around $1 million. So no, there's no way you could move all special ed into IDEA. And also there's maintenance of effort issues. You have to maintain in the following year the level that you were funding special ed out of M&O. So if we were to spend $10 million out of maintenance and operations this year for special ed,
Mhm.
next year we have to at least spend $10 million. unless we can show that it was a high-cost student and that student left, and then therefore we could decrease it. But you have to maintain the level of expenditures out of M&O year to year for special education. And maybe we just need to have a meeting, Dr. Darling, to
Yeah.
to talk through all this.
We may have to meet again because well, from my experience, we did it. We did it all but a small number. We moved them all into the IDEA funds, and we did it legitimately because we had to cut $7 million because we're in the first year of a phase out in our M&O. So, and I asked the SPED director, can you do it? And she said, oh, absolutely not. You know what happened? We did it all but a handful. So that's what I'm asking. Yeah, I want to see where the shortfall is. I want to sit down on a spreadsheet and say, this is how many are funded out of M&O. I think we can squeeze a few more out of here. I know you have to expend a certain amount of money to service those kids.
Right.
That's a given. I mean, if you're getting the money, you've got to service the kids. So did you understand any kind of an idea what I'm asking? I mean, you said it. Could we do it? And you said no.
No, but I'm happy to meet with you and we can
Yeah,
go
I just
through the
wanna see
different
where the
staffing
shortfall
and,
is.
yes.
Okay. Without jeopardizing any of the funds and not servicing the kids that we're supposed to service. I understand. And we get audited almost every year, don't we?
So we're audited every year by our outside CPA firm. And about every 2 years, they're looking at the special ed grants.
On the servicing of those students.
Yes.
Okay, that's all. That was the last of what I had.
Board Member Zaidama, do you have any specific suggestions?
I don't know if, I wish that I could actually have had a conversation first because I don't want to put this out there as it might be a terrible idea, but there's been several times when we've talked in our meeting about we'd rather add days to teachers' contracts and pay them money to handle some of this stuff so that they don't have all the stuff on their plate during the school year. So I don't know what that looks like or anything like that, but if there's any way to have that, even if it's a buffer or something to add some contract days for our teachers where they can get some of this stuff done without having students in the classroom, if we're able to add additional days for that.
I suppose it might be a little late to add to the contracts, but
Well,
we
yeah,
could
you're right.
potentially allocate some stipend funds for that.
Right.
Would that be an accurate statement?
Like I said, it could just be like a crazy idea because I know we already
Laughing from the
issued
table
contracts,
over
but
there.
just-
Everyone says, just laughing. The money tree is growing right behind us, right?
But I think that is actually a good idea, even if it was stipend, thinking of using these other funds one time, that would be an option.
Now, would that be before the year starts or into the summer? That would be during the year where there would be,
I don't know
you
what
know,
that
sort of
looks like.
days that we
I
would-
don't know what that looks like. I didn't totally flesh that out, but just
Yeah,
while
yeah.
we're talking about money and just even if it's an option, because we have brought it up a few times where like we'd rather
Right.
just add
Yeah.
some contract days instead of just putting more and more demands on them on what's already there.
Yeah.
So,
And it comes with pay to do that instead of asking them to do something, you know, in the days that we're already paying them, but actually giving them additional time and pay to do that.
And Wendy
makes
didn't say
sense.
it was terrible, so I don't feel like it was a totally crazy idea.
Well, the thing about the stipends is that it then doesn't impact other portions of the pay versus adding contract days would impact retirement and all that sort of thing as well, I do believe.
So a stipend does include retirement on it. So any pay to a teacher,
Okay,
it does have the retirement contribution.
okay. So it wouldn't save us that.
Right now, the teacher contracts, as far as their teaching, it says the teacher will show up and, have a pulse and teach the grade, whatever that means. And it doesn't have any specificity. It has no requirement or whatever. And so it's actually a disadvantage to the teacher because there's no real delineation of what their goal is. And instead their goal is based on a bunch of stipends and a bunch of this and that and an evaluation, which is very nebulous in a lot of degrees. So I'm actually agreeing with Ms. Board Member Zinema in that it really should be simplified. It should be really something that's, we should decide as a board what we expect teachers to do and what their role is.
I don't
And-
believe that's what Board Member Zinema was saying.
Well,
Board Member Zinema, would you like to clarify?
it's not what she's talking about clarity in including it in a contract, and I'm adding.
I
to
didn't
that
mention
my
anything
opinion.
about the contract. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying. However, I just merely was saying, is there a way that we can give them additional days paid to do some of these extra above and beyond things that are burning our teachers out right now in the contract that they have? So I like the idea that we could do it with a stipend because that doesn't commit us forever. However, I do think in the future, we could look at adding that if we need to, but for this year and looking at what we have to work with right now.
Are the stipends something we can just change mid-year and add and subtract anytime we feel like it? Or isn't
Yes.
that linked to the contract?
No, the stipends are not linked to the contract. The contract is their base pay, and if we require them or ask them to do additional days above and beyond their contract days, then we pay them a stipend.
So halfway through the year, we could just say no more stipends and without a notice.
Depending on what the stipend is for.
That's a terrible way to run a business and have employees that are going to work and bust their butt and really feel loyal to the company.
But the stipends are generally for like a one-time pay, right? Like, so like you came to this training, so we gave you pay for this day. So we wouldn't take away money that they had already earned.
Yes, and an example of one that you couldn't take away, for example, would be when we agreed to pay them a retention stipend if they stayed till a certain period of time. If we then, before that period of time expired, took that away, that certainly doesn't seem fair to me as
Well,
an
I
employer.
agree. And
Okay.
the point I'm just
Okay.
making is that we're not getting the results that we want. The teachers are unhappy and we're not getting the academics that we want. And so I'm just saying the paradigm is we're adhering and saying we can't change a paradigm. And I submit that the paradigm is exactly what's causing the problems. And I think that the consultant that we had come in was saying that, yes, for a slightly different purpose and whatever, but it all boiled down to the same thing, that it's not an attractive way to hire teachers. And I think any person raising children, you give them specific goals and you hold them accountable to them, and all of a sudden everybody's happy.
And that's
And-
part of the evaluation process, as we talked about earlier. I don't know of anyone who puts goals into a contract for an employee. That's usually the contract is kind of like the job description that would say, these are the things that you're required to do. And then as an employer, we evaluate their effectiveness through the review process.
And I agree, it could be done in any number of ways. I just brought up the contract that right now it's so vague. It doesn't even say that they got to try hard or anything like that. I'm just giving it
Okay.
as an example. And the problem with the whole thing is the lack of clarity. They don't know exactly what is required, and that's it. If you go to a
Okay.
kid and you say, hey, after school, I want you to study, that's very vague. If you say, hey, when I get home, I want you to know the multiplication table or whatever, you're going to get a different result. You're actually going to get a result. And that every employee, every person wants to know what their purpose is, what they need to be doing. And I think it's broken right now.
Okay, thank you for your opinion, Board Member Honak. I would like
It's
to
a
get back
fact. It's not
to
an
the
opinion. You all
spreadsheet.
agree.
I would like to hear
That's
from each
terrible.
board member if they have a percentage increase in mind that they would like to see. I believe probably what's going to happen tonight is we're going to give Executive Director Qualls some feedback, and we need to at some point discuss when we're going to see the additional information as well, and when we're going to be able to provide additional feedback on that. But I'd like to get through the rest of the spreadsheet first, unless you have a different plan of attack here.
Go ahead.
Okay. Board Member Zinema, do you have a specific percentage increase in mind? I would suggest 2 to 3 to 4%, but
I would definitely lean more toward the 4%.
So does that is in addition to the 2 or it's 4 in total?
Let me add one thing before you answer that. The second thing that's in this spreadsheet are the returning incentives. I am not opposed to returning incentives. However, I think those incentives need to be taken into account if we were to offer a retention bonus, if you will, along with these percentage increases. So I don't think we can do the max on both of those and be fiscally responsible. Or you could say that you're not even in favor of the returning incentives. I don't
No,
know.
no, I am in favor of the returning incentives because I think we need to keep everyone we can. But I would say probably the 2% with 2% to make it 4.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Melissa, you said the 2% is 2% and the
So
4
there
is
is that
what?
2% they already are recommending and then 2% in addition.
So the 4 total.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And do you have any specifics that would be to all employees?
At this point, I think we need to do all employees.
Thank you. Dr. Dowling, what is your input?
Yeah, okay. Right now, we're recommending it's 2%. That's what I'm hearing. And Melissa, you said you'd like to double that. Okay. I'm against percentage increases. I'm going to tell you why. Percentage increase for somebody making $25,000 of 4% is a lot. It's not, there's no impact compared to somebody who's making $80,000. I recommend that support staff, the ones on the lower part of the pay scale, into the pay scale, the support staff, the people that we need to run this school district, if you want to give them a percentage, then give them 6%, teachers 4, administrators 3. Or my preference is a lump sum, $2,500 for everybody, which would have a more of an impact on somebody who's making 28,000 than it would on somebody making 80,000. For somebody who's making 28, if they got a pay increase, let's say 28, that's 10% for them, and they need it. They need it. This is the backbone. These are the cafeteria workers. These are the bus monitors. These are the teacher aides making $13.83 an hour. I'm totally against percentages. Always have been. You've got to have an impact. It has to be a lump sum amount, or percentages are okay only if the lower end gets a higher percentage than the rest of the people making most of the money.
Thank you, Dr. Dowling. Do you have any thoughts on returning incentives or retention bonuses?
I can't. You talking to me?
Yes. Do you have any thoughts on returning incentives, AKA retention bonuses to be paid? Are you in favor, opposed? What are your thoughts on that?
And where did I see that?
That would be in the spreadsheet underneath the percentage increases. As I was speaking with board member Zaidama earlier, I said, we have the kind of 2% increase, and then we as a board can have input into an additional percentage increase, or in your case, recommending a lump sum, or I think we have to balance out if we're going to do returning incentives with that potential percentage increase or lump sum dollar amount. For example, this year we had 2 different payouts, I do believe, for returning staff. So there's no recommended dollar amount or anything. I just would like to know, are you in favor of a retention bonus, trying to keep teachers and keep staff through a bonus program, a special payout, $500 or something like that?
That was for all staff.
That would be up to you. I'm asking for your feedback.
A retention bonus will only be, in my opinion, should be for all staff.
Okay. Board Member Clymer.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, this question is really hard to answer because, we can all sit up here and say, I'd like to give everybody 6%. 10%. We're working with money that doesn't actually exist. So it's really hard to say. I think I mean, I agree with, I mean, the compensation study with the admin recommendation. I mean, 2% is the absolute minimum that we should or could go. I like Melissa's idea of 4%, but I think there are competing priorities here. So I'm not comfortable saying, yes, I think it should be 4% and nothing else. Because I think there are, you know, competing priorities in terms of, you know, adding more staff and reducing class sizes and all of these things that to me can be just as important as the higher increased numbers. But I am in the ballpark between the 2 and 4, as Melissa stated. In terms of the returning incentives, I think the higher the percentage for the increase, which to me is more important, the lower the retention bonus or percentage should be. I think we gave retention bonuses this year, and which is great. I mean, I think I'd like to be able to do it every year, but to your point earlier, I don't think that it's fiscally responsible for us to max out both of them. I mean, the percentage increase to me should function as part of that retention incentive moving forward. So I'm not in favor of doing away with it, but that's not the priority for me.
Thank you. Board Member Honak.
I agree with Daniel Clemmer. I mean, it'd be wonderful to just give everybody way more money, but the way I look at it is that we're really into the realm of our staff over here that we've entrusted. And if they come to us and say, well, we're having trouble with retention, then, should we address that or whatever? But for us to just sit here and arbitrarily, I don't think we have the data. I think that we've been presented a budget that's been well thought out and has a lot of reasoning in it. And, it's a lot of it's based on luck and, are we going to get money and whatever, maybe we're retaining too much money and we can spend some of that. Those things can be addressed, but I think that I don't really see any big change other than what I think I've said over and over and over. So I won't say it again. But overall, I think it's, just sit arbitrarily and say, well, we want to change this and that without it addressing a problem. Why are we doing it if there's not a problem? And everybody would like more pay, and we should pay the maximum amount. But I think it's a market-based thing is what it really should be, is can we get the teachers that we need at this amount of money? Can we get people to all the staff? It's market-based. And I think we've addressed a lot of that in this whole budget. Was the point of it, that we were more in parity with what other school districts have done. So we've addressed that in what I feel like is an intelligent, scientific manner. So I'm all good with pretty much everything, and unless there's some big problem that we saw that we overlooked, and the problems that we have is teacher stress and academics. So however we can address those, anybody wants to come up with, I will be voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Honak. I have my personal feedback would be for in addition to the 2%, potentially 1 or 2%. Again, depending on how all the numbers shake out. I would caution on the returning incentives. I'm not opposed to those for the upcoming year, since our teacher retention percentage coming off of last year was lower than we have historically experienced. However, I think we need to decide as a district if returning incentives are something that we want to make part of our compensation philosophy, or whether this is strictly going to be a temporary COVID-related compensation and fix for this specific time frame. I don't have the answer to that. I just think that's something that we need to consider in that process. I will say the one thing that Superintendent Gunning and I spoke about in relation to teacher burnout, and I've spoken to some principals about this as well, is another thing that's in the budget spreadsheet, which is how to improve coverage when teachers are absent. And I think this is a really important piece of that teacher burnout that you just referred to, Board Member Honak. So as I stated earlier, we give teachers time to take off, but we discourage them from taking that time off, partly right now because we don't have adequate substitute coverage. And one way to help with that is to have specific subs assigned to schools who would basically be contracted to be there every day. And from some of my conversations with principals, another part of the hesitation to have a sub is giving over your classroom to someone who you're not sure what their experience is. They don't know your school, they don't know your students, and having someone who's assigned to a specific campus would allow those teachers to have a better connection with the substitute teachers to have a better connection with the teachers as well as the students, and have a greater comfort level to know the quality of the substitute teaching that those classrooms would be getting. So that piece is in the spreadsheet, and I'm not sure, I will need some explanation as to what the difference is between the three options that are there, or if the suggestion would be we need all three of those. I'm not exactly certain, but I think that that is one potential solution to teacher burnout, and to, at the same time, retain high quality in classroom teacher instruction. Superintendent Gunning or Ms. Qualls, can you explain the difference between those three options?
So the three options were just to give you reference points, basically. So if we hire them contracted, we generally place them on the placement chart at the 0 to 2 BA level with no 301 performance pay because they're substituting. And the cost for that for 15 would be $456,000. If we contracted them through ESI at the daily rate, it's 534,000. Sorry, the long-term rate. So once a teacher is in an assignment longer than how many weeks? 120 days, then they end up being long-term subs. So the option was, if we went through ESI, would we pay these substitutes the long-term rate because we expect them to be here every day, even though they aren't assigned to the same teacher the whole time? Would we pay them the higher rate, or through ESI, would we still pay them the short-term rate being 432? So if you look at the short-term rate, which is what we would be paying for most of these absences, and compare it to what we would pay if we hired them and placed them on our placement chart, it's about $23,000 difference for 15 employees. So to me, that cost differential would make it worth considering hiring them on our placement chart. I would caution on having them at each school, because there are schools, if you look at a calendar, that have days with no substitutes on their campus. So maybe their first priority is on that campus, but if there's an uncovered position on another campus, maybe they would go assist that campus.
Understood. A follow-up question to that is 15 enough? Are there some campuses that have more teachers that would need 1.5 or 1.25, or do we really need 18? I think that's part of this like tweaking process. I understand that 15 would be head and shoulders above what we have today, which would be a huge improvement. But I just want to make sure if we approve this and put this as part of our plan to mitigate teacher burnout, that we're actually going to be providing enough resources to make that a reality.
Just a quick update on the attendance for teachers as far as uncovered positions go across the district. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen a significant drop. So I think today we had a half-day professional leave uncovered, another half-day uncovered. There were only 3 spots uncovered district-wide today. So we are seeing less absences and subs being able to pick them up since things have settled down a little bit.
Which I understand. I think that's great news, but still I go back to, are we fixing the underlying problem? For so many years, we have said, don't take time off, don't take time off, don't leave your team stranded. Is that why people aren't taking time off? If we were to say, you can take whatever days off you want, utilize the time we're giving you, what would that actually look like to a teacher? Because I feel like we talk out of both sides of our mouth. We give this to them, but then we don't really have the system in place to let them take that. So while I hear what you're saying, that we have not had as many uncovered positions recently, I still think there's an underlying problem that this would help address to actually give our teachers that freedom to take that time when they need it or just when they want it.
I think I'd like to see, I do understand what you're saying. I mean, in terms of like, it's their time. But I also see sort of the other side of that, you know, it's not having a short-term sub or someone that comes in is not always, I mean, it can create more work for them to have to sort of prepare for that. So I like the idea of having sort of the contracted substitutes that are hired, that are ours, because as employees, they can have resources, they can have email addresses, they can have computer access. I mean, that's part of the problem right now is when you have substitutes, the teacher takes their computer home, they don't have a computer when they get to work. They don't have the right password because they can't get in. I mean, all of these little things that are just more headache for the teachers to have to plan. If you did have someone on every campus or someone that covered 1.5 campuses or whatever, having that familiarity might be beneficial. And it seems like that is sort of splitting the cost between the short-term and the long-term rate. So it sort of comes in the middle there. So I would lean towards that option because I think we have a little bit more control over who those employees are and how they're treated in terms of our system if there are employees versus contracting with ESI and not being considered the same sort of employee.
My question would be, Superintendent Gunning, do you think that it would be difficult for us to fill all these positions? Since we currently have positions that are open all over the district, so.
Potentially it could be. But I think it is helpful that they did change the requirements for being qualified for a substitute. So that could potentially offer some flexibility there. I think the other component, attendance is a hard thing. And I know that you earn days, but part of those days that you earn is also a safety net in case you have short-term disability, long-term disability, those kind of things. And also I always go back to what's best for the students. Another flip side to that could be though, if they had all their classes covered and they didn't really need a sub that day, to have a plan in place that maybe they had allocated additional special time or time that they could, be in their classroom, maybe even with that sub, but grading papers or doing other lesson planning or that type of piece. So I don't know necessarily, I haven't heard necessarily that teachers are feeling like they can't take time off. I haven't heard that component. I think it's just more time in their day to do all the things that they need to do. So I think that's where that piece could potentially help as well.
Can we go back to your previous conversation though, just before this about the strategy on retention bonuses and, is this a COVID thing versus strategically, this is what we're going to do moving forward?
Sure.
I just want to say one comment. And as I said in my section, I would really like to see us put more focus on the percentage increase to their base salary, because over time, that is what's going to make more sense and be able to have us pay more. The one-time things are great. But 5 years from now, they're not building on that in terms of their salary. And every year, if we can increase more. So I think it's great to have that incentive, but if we can only pick one or we have to do half and half, I would rather see all of that go to increases and none of that go to retention bonus and then build over time versus just have a one-time stipend this year.
Okay, there are a couple of other things that Ms. Qualls included in the spreadsheet. Would you like to address those and ask for feedback? Or I can, it's fine.
So the other items under benefits, I just included those thinking that the insurance was going to go up 10%. And we had talked before about shifting some of the cost to the employees. I'm not recommending it. I was just bringing it so that you would have information if you wanted to consider that. And then the last item is to pay off debt. So in 2014, we did enter into a lease. It was around $1.6 million for energy management system. There were several years to start with. There was no prepayment option. We now have been in the lease long enough to have a prepaid option. And so we could pay down or pay off that lease at the end of the year or anytime until it actually would be retired. So I just wanted to include that as an option for you, why it would be using up some of the funding, but then in the future years, you'd be having around 140,000 left in the M&O budget. So that was just another thought.
Any feedback from the board members on those items?
I'll just comment on both the benefits. I know last year when we talked about over the years, the increases and sort of having what is the cutoff? What is the amount the district is going to pay? And then we're going to have to sort of switch over to some sort of supplement from the employee. Off the top of my head, I do not remember what that figure was. It was somewhere in the $7,000 range, which is where we are. So I definitely think it's something that we should consider. I know that's always been an amazing benefit that Litchfield has given that other places don't or can't afford to do. So I hate to lose that, but even with a 3% increase or a 5% increase, it's not much, but over that many employees and, over $7,000 an employee. And because it's free, we have employees that take advantage of it that have access to insurance other places, but they get it from us because it's free. And so I think we do need to, have a hard and fast number in terms of when we approach X, that's going to be the time that we have to, have that supplement come from the employees. I don't have the answer for that, but I do think we need to decide what that is. As in terms of the payoff debt, I am not in favor of doing that. I think $700,000 is a considerable amount of money just to save 66,000. I think that's right now that kind of funding seems better spent in other ways.
I agree with board member Clymer on the payoff debt aspect. I understand that paying that off earlier would be a more conservative approach. However, when I look at the $67,000 in savings, all I see is a teacher salary. As far as the benefits go, I would like to see the dental added for student transporters so that they are more in line with other employees that we have, as well as the recommendations that were made during that process. I am not in favor of passing along at this point a share of the premiums to our employees. However, I think us as a district absorbing the 3% increase again needs to be balanced with the increase that we provide to the base increase to teachers. I think all of those things, because each of those benefit the teachers. If there's an incentive, returning incentive, if there's an increase to the performance pay base, and there's an increase to the premiums that we are paying, all three of those items go into the total compensation for our staff. And we need to be cognizant of all three of those pieces.
The only fear there I would say is for I think you said there's a 70% participation rate. I don't remember exactly, right? 70% of our employees participate in that. So 30% of our employees that don't participate would see a less of an increase because their fellow employees take advantage of that. So that's it's got to come from
Agreed.
somewhere. I understand. I'm just saying we do have to balance that out appropriately.
Agreed. Is there any other feedback on the budget planning spreadsheet? Based on the timing that was in the presentation, Ms. Qualls, what do you think would be the best way to proceed from here?
It's an interesting question.
Well, I just know occasionally we have walked away from this meeting knowing where we're going.
Right.
And I don't know that we're walking away from this meeting knowing exactly where we're going. We definitely still have some questions out there.
So we do have a special or a study session last month or the last Tuesday, right? maybe we shift some items. Mhm. 29th. Maybe we could look at moving some things on March 29th, still go forward on March 15th, looking, talking about the staffing numbers, class size, that type of information, the insurance plans. I'll get as much of it ready as I can by the 15th. It is a short week next week.
Yes.
But I'll get as much ready as I can, and then if we would need to, we could look at the March 29th to actually approve the final projected budget.
Okay, that gives you adequate time. I wasn't sure what the timing was of where we had to have that approved.
So we still have time. The classroom site funds amounts won't be available till March 31st to know how to even estimate those amounts for the contracts for teachers. So if we approve that information April 12th, that still should be fine to revise those contracts, have the other administrator contracts done for the May meeting. So
Okay.
as long as we finalize everything by April 12th meeting.
Okay, great. Do any board members have anything additional they'd like to give Ms. Claus's feedback for her to consider in this second go around?
No.
Okay, wonderful. Anything else that you need from us, Executive Director Qualls?
No, I think that's it. Other than we'll set up a meeting with Dr. Dowling to go over special ed.
Wonderful. Thank you for your presentation and your patience and all the information that all of the administrative cabinet has provided us tonight. It has been very informative. I look forward to phase 2 of the budget planning discussion, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.